There's open seats. The only thing I will say is the judges are going to sit in this front row, but if you can grab something to eat, drink, and start to head this direction, we're going to get going in just a few minutes. Thank you. They can find some chairs over there. Christian, are we good? What's that? Well, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for coming to the first ever deal day put on by Reflective and Archain. So thank you very much for coming and coming to our beautiful new office space that is still in the process, but you can see some semblance of how it's coming together. So thank you so much. I would like to say hello to everybody out there that's watching. We've got the streaming live, so thanks to Christian and the team that are doing that. So a little bit about that when things are streaming like that, if we could sort of keep the noise levels down, that will help the audiences out that are at home or in their offices right now. So just a few things that I want to go through. First of all, just as a show of hands, how many of you here have heard of or know about Archain? Greg, do you see this? That's pretty impressive. All right, the next thing, how many of you are devs that are working on a DApp project right now? That's great. All right. And then finally, I'm assuming this isn't your first blockchain event, but are there any newbies here? Is there anybody here that hasn't ever been to a blockchain event before? Well, welcome. Hopefully this will be the first for you of many. First of all, let me tell you a little bit about Deal Day and kind of why we're here or what we're doing here. So there are tags on your chairs. I don't know if you guys saw that, but we would love feedback from you. So if you could just go on to that. It looks like there's a site you can go on and you can fill out a questionnaire for each one of the companies that you're going to see up here. So that would be great if you guys get a chance to hit that when you're out here watching these great companies that are being presented. We hope to take this event and sort of package it and have it be deal day in a box, if you will. So the idea is to do this once a month, maybe every other month, to take it all over the country or the world for that matter, and take exactly what you're seeing here and sort of push that out everywhere. So there's a chance for different geographic areas to participate. So in this particular event, we had over 20 entrants that came in. The Reflective team narrowed that down to 6 companies, and those 6 companies are the ones that you're going to hear today. Some of them are Seattle-based. There's a few of them that are from across the country, so we're super excited about that. The way it's going to work, you guys may have been to some sort of pitch days before. Each company is going to have 7 minutes to make their presentation. They'll use the screen here, and then afterwards there's 10 minutes of Q&A. The judges who are in the front are going to have the first crack to ask a couple of questions, and then we'll open it up to questions from you all. We will have microphones out there, so please grab a mic if you've got a question. We're trying to keep this on a tight time frame, so the idea is 7-minute pitch, 10-minute Q&A, 3 minutes between the next one, so hopefully we'll get through the first 3 in the first hour. If you want to grab something to eat or drink, do it in that 3-minute gap that we have between. And then after the first 3, we'll take like a 10 or 15-minute break, and we'll go from there. So we are also going to have one of our portfolio companies, Encrypt, is going to make a presentation. So we're super excited about those guys. They're going to talk at the end of the presentations and tell you a little bit about what they're doing. The judges, I will introduce them here in a second. They are going to be in charge of sort of picking the best app that they see as far as applicability to the Archain platform, the blockchain usage, business, everything that you can think of. They've got a scorecard here, and they will be coming up with that decision at the end of this. Let me introduce you to the judges. First of all, we've got Greg Meredith, who is the creator and founder of Archain. Greg, if you can stand up and wave to everybody. I know Christian wants you on the camera, so it's Greg. So Greg is the visionary. He's the reason that we're all here, why this space is the way that it is. And he and I have been talking about this deal day for a long time. So I'm excited to finally have it going. So thank you, Greg, for coming on board. Gwen Sheridan, who is here from New Alchemy. So she is the COO of New Alchemy. I don't know how many of you know about New Alchemy. They're here in Seattle. The last I heard, I think you got like 120 employees. Is that right? They've ICO'd 80 to 85 companies. I saw on your site last night that that cap of those companies is a little over $1 billion. Was high? Okay. It'll go even higher. So these guys are a force in the city. So if you don't know about New Alchemy, for sure look them up. I know Jen Young is here as well from New Alchemy. So say hi to that staff and those folks that are here. So welcome and thank you for being here for that. Next to Gwen, we have Alex Ortiz. He's with Life ID. Life ID is a super cool company. They are in the ecosystem of our chain. They are solving the identity issue that we have out there. If you don't know Alex, I don't know where you've been hiding or what rock you've been under. Like he is, he's everything to blockchain in Seattle. So thank you, Alex, for coming on board. Deanna Duke, so we have her. She is representing our chain. She, brand new, her title, Director of Ecosystem Operations, correct? So she is sort of the glue, and if there's anything that needs to get done on projects that we've seen through our chain on the corporate level, there's a lot of things that are going through Deanne. So thank you very much for coming. Appreciate that. At the far end, we have Tom Lindman. So strategic initiatives at Consensus. So Tom and I actually just met. I don't even know how you found out about this, but he applied to be one of the judges. I didn't know Consensus was in town. It's great. I've heard that there's only one of you. Hopefully we can build that up. So for those of you that do or don't know, this isn't Consensus as in Consensus, the big event in New York. This is Consensus, the one tied to Ethereum. So super excited to have you here and helping us out. And finally, and last but not least, Kevin Valentine, our very own. So he is with Reflective. He is a venture partner with us. He heads up our office in New York. He's out here because like anybody would want to do, you'd want to spend the month of July in Seattle if you're coming from New York, right? So he's going to be the one sort of overseeing the judges and everybody that's here. So thank you very much, Kevin, for taking this on. Appreciate that. I got to give a little bit of a plug for who we are. So I know a lot of you know who we are. You've met a lot of our teammates. Some of them are over in China now, but Kevin is here. Shahan is running around. Lee is here as well. Rebecca is here. So we've got some of our team members are obviously in place. Introduce yourself to them. We have our agency of record. I know Jerome and Cash are here somewhere. They're here as well. Futurism is doing a lot of the filming. So we're super excited to have as many people come to this event and to Seattle and to see what we're doing here. It just makes me feel really, really good and happy to see this. We had about 120 people RSVP'd. I got super panicked and had everybody cut it off at that because I didn't know what would happen. It looks like, I know we had seats for 75 and we've got at least 25 sitting in the back. So that's pretty amazing. I didn't know the space could even hold that, so this is great. So thank you all for coming and doing that. At Reflective, we are the venture fund for our chain. So our objective is to invest in and partner with as many companies as we can to help put on the platform of our chain. And that is launching at the end of this year. So we started the fund and got going middle of January. We're into 22 companies so far. We've gone at a breakneck speed. So Kevin, the team, and Lee and Shahan, those guys have been bringing deal after deal after deal. It's killing us. I don't know what it's doing to them, but to see that many, I think we've seen close to 400 deals to get to those 22. So there's certainly an appetite out there. I'd like everybody to know that. Like, this isn't just something where, there's a few D-apps and we don't know how applicable they are. We're seeing some really, really good deals. And you're going to see that from the 6 that we selected here today as well. We try to be different than any other venture firm. I don't even like calling ourselves a venture firm. We're trying, Jerome's going to help us on the agency side, figure out a new word for venture because we are so different. Greg always talks about with the co-op, radical transparency and radical inclusion. Like, I want to just be radically different, and radically different in the sense that we don't act like a typical VC firm. Like Kevin and Shahan and David and everybody, we've all been here, we've all sat up here and done these pitches from that side. I don't think a lot of venture places can say that. So we know what it feels like to do that, and we know what it feels like, how you're treated, quite frankly. And I think there's a different way that you can treat these companies that are coming through. And so we're doing that by trying to be caring to start with, and secondly, really give them as much insight as we possibly can. And we do that by sort of shepherding them in this office space, for example. So there are 32, when this is all cleared out, there's 32 extra desks here that we ask our companies once we invest to come to. So we've got 4 of them here already. 2 are in place, 2 more are on the way. So the idea is to bring them in. We can help them on the marketing side. We can help them if they're working on tokenization, on the legal, whatever it is, to sort of help them incubate and get themselves out on their own 2 feet. So we're super proud of that. And then most importantly is we also invite our chain community members to come in, or even the staff. So there's always a desk here for you. You just have to be an our chain community member. It's pretty easy. It's $20, and come in and you can share a desk. And the collaboration that we're seeing happening here is pretty amazing. It's growing all the time. Every time I walk in the office, I see new people doing things in this space. So that's really cool. And we're almost done. I would like to, and I don't know if the groups are here, I just wanted to do a quick shout out to, we have 4 university groups that are here. And this is something we're really, really proud of. And I know our chain is behind this as well. And our team has gone out to find the brightest minds that we can in universities. And we're striking strategic partnerships with those universities, specifically the student-run blockchain initiatives that they have at the university. So in attendance here today, we have the folks from Harvard, who we put a partnership with. We have the blockchain, there's right here. Yeah, come on up. We have the group from MIT in Cambridge, so they are here as well. If they want to come on up. One of our first partnerships that we did was with folks down at Berkeley, so the Berkeley blockchain people are here as well. I haven't seen them, but they are here. And then last but certainly not least, and from our own town, I'm super proud to have the University of Washington group is here as well. All right, so these guys, there's so many young people here. I want to say this is like the future, but I mean, they're living it, they're doing it. There are some of these companies that we are actually in partnerships and working with. They're driving what's going to be that next generation, and they're doing it at the university level. They're obviously doing it at some high-level universities. So our goal is to have these guys work together and push this out to as many universities as we can. If we can start driving curriculum and everything else, I would like you guys all at some point, I know he's only got so much time, but say hi to Greg at some point. I know he would love to meet you as well. These guys know everything about our chain and everything that you're doing. So yeah, so it's impressive. So thank you very much, guys. Big round of applause for all of our universities. Thanks, guys. All right, so now we get down to it. We've got 6 companies presenting. Again, at the very end, while the judges go into the back room and deliberate on the winner, we're going to have Encrypt is going to come up. So if I can, I don't know if we had a chance to talk to every one of the presenting companies, but as we have one presenting, if the next could sort of queue up back here, Lee will get you all taken care of, so your presentation and everything's there. We have that 3-minute transition. So the first up is Concrete. Oh, wait a second. I got to do one more thing because they put this up for a reason. So anybody that's out there, live stream or even here, if you just send out a tweet or mention, the hashtag is Deal Day, and put in there @ReflectiveVP, there's a 500 rock reward for who has the best tweet, picture, whatever it is. So please feel free to tweet to your heart's content and do whatever you got to do to promote this. So without any further ado, let's bring that first company up in Concrete.
Before we begin, I just want to say a quick thank you to Reflective Ventures and also the Arching Co-op for having us come through here. We're honored and we're excited to pitch and compete. I'm Sean Shea. I'm CEO of Concrete. I'm here with our awesome team. This is Rui Maximo, CTO, Jordan Levy, VP of Engineering, and Mark Cooley, who is our advisor around blockchain strategy. So we are Concrete. So Concrete is a commercial real estate investment marketplace powered by the blockchain technology. We'll be disrupting the real estate market by making it really simple and easy to buy, sell, and trade fractional commercial real estate. So Concrete was predicated on the philosophy that we really believe that truly wealth-generating opportunities around real estate should be democratized and made accessible to everyone. When thinking about the marketplace, we naturally have constructs of supply and demand. And for us, supply is commercial real estate, and demand is the everyday investor. So you might ask, what is an everyday investor? Looks like we are on there. Sorry about that. So everyday investor, they are the millennials, the Gen Z, the 99%, the ones that are not the high net worth individuals. Wearing that lens and taking a look at the market, we found that a lot of the existing deals out there that are actually providing really good returns in the market, they're really exclusive. They're for accredited investors, and you have to be invited into participating in with the deal. Now, you could participate in terms of buying commercial real estate today on the publicly traded market, but you're usually going to buy a stock in like a public REIT. Those usually lack really strong returns, and they underperform the S&P 500. If you are a career commercial real estate investor, you've probably taken advantage of 1031 tax-deferred exchanges, and that's usually a pretty complicated and costly transaction, so it's really out of reach for an everyday investor. So taking the Concrete philosophy, sorry, I feel like this is a lot out of order. We have decided to build an application that makes purchasing commercial real estate investments really easy, just with a few taps, a few clicks. So we're going to have no fees for investing. We're going to have automated and scheduled investment strategies that allow people to take a more passive approach to investing in commercial real estate. And we're also going to allow them to manage different investment strategies and take advantage of things such as 1031 tax-deferred exchanges by looking for like-kind properties on our platform. When looking at the supply side, we focused in on commercial real estate developers, REIT fund managers, and other people that are operating commercial real estate companies. In our surveys and sort of market analysis over the last few months, we discovered that there have been these traits that have come up time and time again, which there's been pains around financing, making sure that you can close financing for a deal that you have on board. There are cost pressures from investors looking for more value out of working with investors and reduce fees. And liquidity seems to be a sensitive topic. We've seen a lot of interesting novel ideas in terms of introducing liquidity in pre-existing products, but they usually come at the cost of the haircut of what the investor puts in original value. So we're building a commercial real estate investment management platform that is going to be predicated on building security tokens and offering security tokens. Our platform is going to allow for commercial real estate companies to receive reliable and quick gap financing. We're going to help them reduce OpEx by automating a lot of mundane day-to-day administrative activities. And we're also going to go out and talk with pre-existing commercial real estate companies that already have buildings or have deals and already have investor sets and take their current investments and then make them into security tokens so that we can offer liquidity to their pre-existing investors. So if we just back up and look at the market from a macro perspective, we're starting to see a really large shift coming on board. So we have millennials, the Gen Z, that are starting to enter in their prime earning ages, and we're seeing companies like Robinhood, M1 Finance, and Wealthfront really just start to take off and draw traction. Through a few different formulas and a few different approaches, when we were trying to calculate what our service attainable market was, we came out to an average of $34.75 billion. So however way you slice it, it's a really big market opportunity. Our business model is going to be zero fees when you're investing into commercial real estate, but we will charge a fee when you're selling your position. We're also going to offer more of a premium product where you can manage your different investments and have early access into new investments. On the supply side, for commercial real estate companies, we're building out a workflow system, a tokenization platform for management, and we're going to charge and have a subscription-based model for that. And we'll also be taking a transaction fee when we're doing deals and exchanges like gap financing. We'll be targeting a 2.5% average on those types of loans and deals. And we'll also be charging a nominal fee for automated transactions such as dividends. So comparing us to some of the market incumbents right now, you'll see right away we're just different. Philosophically, technologically, what we're trying to do here is just going to bring a whole new dynamic into the exchange of the real estate market. If we achieve full vision here, it's going to start looking and feeling a lot more like the current stock exchange market that we have versus the sort of slow-moving real estate market.
So with Concrete, we're going to be tokenizing assets, but we also need to be able to qualify investors, and so we'll leverage Life ID for that. In addition, we want to be able to have investors take an active role by being able to vote on which properties we would invest in, and so we'd leverage government for that piece as well. Our platform is going to consist of 7 different layers where we provide automation technology and compliance and regulatory support to provide a turnkey solution for REITs for their funds. So for the everyday investor, we'll have multiple transactions that will occur over on the blockchain. And we're planning on doing 4 different milestones. One is going to be the first where we'll do a dog feeding of our own Concrete fund. The second phase will be tokenizing for other funds and other partners that we'll have. The third is going to be the exchange piece where we'll allow these tokens to be traded by investors. And then the last piece is going to be the enablement of 1031 exchanges of properties into tokens.
Oh, yeah. So we're looking to raise $3 million in this next round here that we're pursuing. This money is going to be used for operational expenses to handle our burn rate for 24 months as we bring the platform to the market and obtain customers that will be revenue generating for the business. It's also going to be used for our legal hurdles that we foresee because we're going to be working with security tokens, so it's relatively new. And in regards to the team, I didn't get to mention this earlier, but we're not first-time entrepreneurs. Jordan and I just sold our first company that we bootstrapped with no external financing. We brought the company to over $16 million in annual recurring revenue before we sold it. Rui here is a battled war veteran inside of the emerging blockchain space. He's been the CTO of Storm Token when they ran their ICO, and he's currently the CTO of Life ID. With that said, we just wanted to thank everyone here for this opportunity. It's been fantastic. We're looking forward to seeing everyone else's pitches.
Thank you, guys. Here you go, Kevin.
Just wanted to turn it over to the panel for any questions.
Good job, guys. Nice. You mentioned that one of your target customers is sort of these millennials or everyday investors or younger people, et cetera, but it's also security tokens. So what about the SEC rules that are going to require a $200,000 salary, et cetera, in order to invest in a security token? Is there a mismatch there, or is that cool?
No. That's a really good question. So, as Rui mentioned earlier, we're looking to build out. As Rui mentioned earlier, we're looking to build out and kind of dog food ourselves the first Concrete fund. The goal there is to target good investors to really just prove that we have a platform that's operating. As we get into the second milestone where we're actually bringing out a security tokenization platform, that's where we're also going to be taking on the legal hurdle of figuring out how to work with a broker-dealer to then offer this to non-accredited investors. Does that answer your question, or do you have a follow-on for that?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
I had a question for you. You all mentioned that you're looking to do 1031 exchanges. So some of what you're passing back and forth as an asset is also records, titles, et cetera. How are you getting cooperation from municipalities, whomever, wherever titles processed in order to be able to transfer ownership of real estate assets?
Yeah, that's something we're looking into and doing a little bit more research in terms of how we accomplish this on blockchain itself. But currently, from just researching the market and seeing pre-existing companies that do handle these 1031 exchanges, there is a DST, so Delaware Statutory Trust, in which you can put real estate assets into, and they allow for multiple participants to own fractional shares that then roll into other investments as well. And so we'll be pursuing that in terms of our research for figuring out how we deliver that to the market.
I was looking at this from a completely different perspective. Are you guys familiar with Christopher Alexander's work? So Christopher Alexander is an architect. He builds real buildings, and he also influenced a lot of software architects of my generation and later. And one of the things he points out is that when we think about the built environment as an investment, our relationship to the built environment in terms of what it does for us as humans begins to attenuate. And so I was thinking about your platform and sort of the pros and cons for that. I mean, the more I think about it as an investment, the more I'm disconnected from that built environment, which means that I'm less likely to be sensitive to its impact on a neighborhood or a community or anything like that. But on the other side, I was thinking, well, but if I could have decent fractional ownership, a community could come in and clean up a neighborhood or clean up a community, a region. And so what are your thoughts on that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I actually have been thinking about this for quite some time. So our sort of thesis on this is that if people start to own just a portion of buildings that they're sprinkled around where they live, they're going to feel like they really take ownership over their community. So what we're trying to solve here is not to solve the ownership model around, I'm going to go out, buy my own home, live in it, and it's going to be my space for the next decade. What we're trying to solve here is to give people the opportunity to invest in things that are for the city, for larger investors they typically wouldn't be able to get into in the past. So I was thinking about, what does a construction worker feel when they actually go and work on a development project? So they're going in, they're collecting paycheck, they're working their whole day, and then they exit. It's just a transaction for them. But if they could start investing into that, then they're going to put in a lot more thought and attention into their work.
There's also a piece about voting. So if they can vote and have ownership on it, there's their governance piece there. That gives them a little bit more ownership and pride into what they invest in.
Yeah, can you explain a little bit more about the voting? What are they voting on?
Sure. So they can vote on which properties to invest, for example, or how to manage the properties. So we have to really it depends on the fund as well as the property that they want to invest that's in question. But they would have the ability to invest in specific properties, so they would vote on which ones to invest in, for example, and then also whether the asset is going to get liquidated. Or is there going to be some changes, like if we're going to do renovations on the property and hold it a little longer? So those types of questions that a normal property owner would have. But now this is done through a voting process.
So just kind of add and kind of plus one what Rui was talking about. There's a few things that we went over pretty quickly in the presentation. So in sort of our market analysis, we've discovered that there are more of the passive funds, the REITs, the ones where you can just kind of throw money in and forget about it. Those take on a very different mentality of an investor. They're just passive, they're looking for returns. Given that we've been studying millennials and sort of that cohort, I myself am a millennial, I find it fascinating to be able to impact a larger decision. And so governance into something that is aggregated and feels really out of touch makes me feel a little more in touch with that. In terms of actual voting, there's so many decisions that can be made when it comes down to private placements and diving into different types of deals in which you may take on different roles. And that's where we have that. And it could be just a different flavor for the different type of placement that you're making.
We wanted to get any questions from any audience members. Does anyone have a question?
Hey guys, Justin Yeshua from Blackhead Capital. I like what you guys are working on here, but the one piece that you haven't really touched on is how your platform leverages the blockchain to deliver a better product than what exists today with the Fundrises or Realty Mogul or Patch of Land, or the list goes on. So if you can touch on that, but also keep in mind the regulatory hurdles of what you might be trying to achieve through using a decentralized platform to run the business.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So, you mentioned a few good names here, and those are the ones that, we study and talk about a lot internally. The way that we differentiate is, first and foremost, is the tokenization component. So creating a security token to represent actual physical asset. This is an emerging space right now, and so we're seeing a lot of movement with Coinbase and their acquisitions, T0 coming out with the securities exchange as well. We're hoping that we can kind of pursue this path as well and get to the point where we can offer a security token to represent that physical asset, to then be able to kind of swap fractional shares of it. And it's going to be different for every type of deal. So it's easy enough to say, okay, for the concrete fund, we would do an ERC20. Now, if we're going to pull in ERC 721 or 888 for dividends later on, there may be different constructs underneath that we'd have to figure out for private placements. But they exist today. So with DSTs and 1031 exchanges that you can find on marketplaces on the internet, people are already moving around fractional shares of ownership that they've gotten into, but typically through just this sort of long daisy chain of investments that they've made, and they're looking for like-kind exchanges.
So another big piece about the tokenization is that it creates liquidity. So right now, if you were to invest into a real estate fund, you're locked in for a certain period of time, whether it's 7 years or 10 years before you get revenue coming through. And so revenue would consist of two aspects, either through dividends from rental income or through a sale event. By tokenizing, we can issue our dividends in the form of tokens initially, so that creates some liquidity. And then by having an exchange, investors have the ability to sell and buy into the fund, which creates that level of liquidity that doesn't exist in the market today as well.
A really quick governance type of question for how you'd manage your fund. I'm Ron Pierre, by the way. One token, one vote, or one person, one vote?
So that's a good question. The way we're thinking is it would be staked. So based on the number of investment that you have, if you have a large number of tokens, then you would have a percentage of vote based on that because you're obviously more invested into it.
Okay, so some variation of token versus
Correct.
person. Okay,
Right.
Thank you.
On to that, I think, I've been talking with Mark in terms of how we could partner up with governance to actually help with some of the governance around this. And he's described to me just multiple variations and different types of voting systems. And so I think it would really be based on whoever's listing that potential opportunity in terms of how they want to manage governance.
Thanks, guys. Thank you very much. All right, so we've got a quick 3-minute break here. We're bringing some more chairs out, as many as we can, but there are a lot of seats in here. If you guys want to grab a seat and fill in, there's probably 15 chairs here. Longmen, Suntech, you guys are up next. Thank you. How you doing? There's a lot of seats up front if you guys want to jump in. Next up, guys, is going to be Paramation after these. So if Paramation guys want to get over there for the next one. All right, everybody. Up next for our next company, we're going to have Longmen Suntech Energy.
Thank you. Okay, firstly, like a big thank you to the Reflective and the Archain team. I mean, for having us here. So, to start with, we are Longmen Suntech Energy, and we sell green power to businesses at a very competitive prices. Now, how do we do that? To start with, we have a team which has got a great mix of engineering and financing talent. We have 4 engineers from India's one of the most premier engineering institutes, and we got a PhD in finance from Wharton, who has traveled with me today to Seattle. Now, what's the problem that we are solving and what's wrong with the power sector? I mean, to start with generation. Talking of generation, much of the power which is generated around the world is done using fossil fuel, which means a high carbon footprint. Now, it is very difficult to find land to build these huge power plants, which means it leads to the problem of power shortage in a much larger part of the developing world. Now, whatever gets generated needs to be transmitted on the transmission lines, which are not only expensive to build, but as much as 30% of the power gets lost in these transmission lines in much part of the world. Now, the last bit is distribution. Now, after all this, when power reaches a socket, it is subject to a very complex set of regulations, which they claim is customer friendly, but power consumers all around the world have been facing one big problem, that is the rising cost of electricity. Now, is that all? Unfortunately, no, because there is this big trouble of financing all this power generation, transmission, and distribution capacity, for which you have to talk to a centralized ecosystem of large financial institutions, which leads to the big problem of lack of access to capital and high cost of whatever capital you manage to get. So what's the solution? Now, the solution is rooftop solar power plants. Now, we have built some very cool power plants, including one of India's largest rooftop solar power plant for a healthcare facility. But then how does it help? To start with, it's got zero carbon footprint. Secondly, these are offered at a zero down business model to the power consumers, which means they don't have to think again, or think twice before having us there. These power plants don't need any land to be built, which almost solves most of the problem as far as the power generation is concerned. Rooftop solar power plants, by definition, don't need any transmission lines. And our transmission loss, well, if you can call it a loss, is less than 0.5% because all the power needs to travel is from the rooftop down to the building. From the distribution part, we are actually saving ourselves from much of the regulatory trouble because we are generating power at the very premise where it is consumed. But still, we are subject to some of the problems, such as the net metering regulations and all. So that last part of the cookie, that is, with respect to distribution, is still not completely solved. But one big problem still remains: how to finance all this. So what we thought about is, if we can integrate all these rooftop solar power plants in limited geographies under what is called a microgrid configuration, that would really be great. But then people need to transfer power and settle payments. People need to have a record of all the power that is generated and consumed. We believe a fast and a reliable blockchain is the network on which these microgrids can exist. So that's what we've been doing for the last year and a half, figuring out the configuration for a decentralized distributed solar microgrid, because we believe it can give a trustless record of whatever power is generated and consumed. Above all, the community within these microgrids will be able to determine the pricing mechanism and not some centralized authority which you never see in your life. We believe it will be highly scalable. There will be a high level of redundancy, very low transmission losses, because still we are talking of microgrids, not large national grids wherein power is transmitted over long distances. And we believe we have also figured out a way to solve the decentralized financing problem with the token sale. So this is what we're going to do. We have planned to do an ICO. We are already 5 months into the planning for it. Whatever we raise in an ICO, we will leverage using the conventional financial institutions that we've been talking all along. If they give us a good deal on that, we build rooftop solar power plants using all this money. When these guys pay us back, that is the power consumers pay us back, we pay back to the financial institutions. I'm sorry, there was a back here, I don't know, somebody got lost somewhere. So we actually will pay back to these guys. So we pay back to the financial institutions whatever we owe to the institutions. We'll tokenize the money and we'll send it back to the investor. But that's just the beginning of it. Eventually, the power consumers will have gained enough confidence in our tokens. The token value would have stabilized, at which point in time we will allow our power consumers to pay us in the tokens. Apart from that, we will allow these power consumers within the limited geography of a microgrid to transact power using a token, at which time our token from a security token will have become a security plus a utility token, or what is better known as a hybrid token. At that point in time, we believe we will be having enough opportunity to deleverage from the conventional financial institution ecosystem. Now, how big is that market? According to the CIA World Factbook, there's going to be a $5 trillion market just to build all this power generation capacity. I'm just talking of rooftop solar, which will generate close to 0.9 trillion worth of electricity on an annual basis. Now, I will kind of jump first to here. Now, how does that help the Archain community? We are basically talking of inducing high-level efficiency to the power network. Also, we are talking of replacing the existing grid systems around the world, which means an exponential rise in the blockchain transactions which can happen on the blockchain that we choose to use. From a technology perspective, we'll be decentralizing the upstream, the midstream, and the downstream of the power sector. There are many other sectors which are structured around this way. What we do can be a template for the Archain community and for all those who are planning to join the Archain community. And last but not the least, an investment plus a technology partnership with us just shows the strong commitment of the Archain and the Archain communities towards green and a sustainable economy. I'll get back to our competitors. We have competitors in terms of utility scale solar power developers, conventional power distributors, fossil fuel developers. Now, what is interesting to note is some of these will actually end up as collaborators because they will have no other option but to come on our microgrid and let their solar power plants transact power for their power consumers. Our ask for doing all this is $2.5 million, out of which we plan to spend like $33,000 for the microgrid blockchain development, $65,000 for ICO management, and $2.4 million for the launch of the ICO. Last but not the least, why we believe Archain is great for us. We want a team which is technology-focused, community-building focused. We want a blockchain which is like really fast, which is scalable, and above all, we really love the fact that it can exist in like a separated parallel blockchains can exist because that is what we need to run hundreds of microgrids around the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Really appreciate it. Can you talk a little bit about what you've done so far to prove this out in terms of partners and equipment and people testing it? I'm curious what your early stage proving ground looks like.
Okay, so we have $1 million worth of installations already on the ground. We started off in India, we raised capital in India. Then we have raised capital in the US, and with US money, we have built more capacity out there. So there is $1 million worth of these rooftop solar power plants which we have built and are operating and are paying back to the investors. So we have an operational model on the ground, but then now the next feature is to integrate them onto what's called a microgrid, and we need a network to do that. So that's the next stage in our revolution. Yeah, and yeah, a very short question as well, I mean, an answer to that as well is, we have a ready pipeline of $75 million. Because what we have done is we have contracted with the likes of the Decathlon Sports from France or the Accor Hotels from France, I mean, to do their showrooms and hotels. So we have done one installations for, I mean, some of the locations, and they want us to do all their locations, I mean, around the geographies which we are in discussion with. So we have a ready pipeline of 75 million, which means the moment we do an ICO, we can just directly pump all that money into the installation for which we have already contracted.
Thank you, Sajid, for the presentation. This is certainly a problem worth solving. One of the pillars of a wonderful future is a sustainable planet. From the perspective of a founding team, can you talk about why you and your team would be willing to invest the next several years of your life, if not more, to solving this specific problem?
Okay. Yeah, firstly, I mean, we are engineering graduates, as I just mentioned, the start from one of the premier engineering institutes. Then we did our MBAs. Then we got a great finance guys on board with us. Now, technically, we thought that, the whole power sector is basically an engineering plus a financial problem. There has to be efficiencies brought in from a technological perspective, and there has to be financial solutions brought about from a business model perspective. So, I mean, technically, we all were doing, different kind of stuff all around the world. I personally was a consultant out there in London, but we all grouped back, and we thought that, if we are that good, we should definitely be solving this such a big problem, because ultimately we are engineers plus financial experts. And we have dedicated already 5 years of our life to it. We have reached, as I said, $1 million worth of installations, 75 million worth of pipeline, and we believe, we have a great length to go ahead.
Yeah, thanks again for the presentation. It's wonderful to see people focus on these kinds of problems. I do have a question, which is how do you tackle the problem of tying the actual power transmission to the token, right? So there has to be some kind of monitor on power transmission, and how do you secure that relative to the token?
Okay, we already have IoT devices in the place, which is attached to all these power plants. Which, if you let me, I can actually log into any of a power plant and can show how much power got generated at what part of the day. Now, the idea is, but all those networks are not safe enough to do the transactions happen. So we need a network when all this information can be keyed in, it can remain safe, and there has to be a pricing and a market mechanism wherein the community decides that, nobody will sell power like about 10 cents. Or maybe the community decides we don't have an upper cap. So, so we have a network which takes in information from all these power plants as of today. And we actually live display it to all our investors sitting in the US, in India, and we actually have started doing that in Japan as well. So we are live streaming all this information, but we are not using it for transactions as of now. So all that information put into like a very clever blockchain kind of a network and allow transaction using the tokens that we have raised. That's where we are progressing currently.
So that wasn't, thank you for that. It's a great background information. It doesn't quite answer my question. So essentially you've got an oracle, which is your network, and you have some blockchain network, which is managing the tokenization of the use of the power.
Right.
Okay. But how do we know that the oracle is telling the truth? How do we know how the information that comes in, what secures that information relative to the tokenization record? Do you understand?
Okay.
Because someone could come along and potentially hack some of the devices or hack the network. So how is that secured relative to the tokenization record? It's a problem every oracle faces, right? Every oracle that gets data onto the chain, you're going to have to trust the oracle.
Oh, right. So, so the IoT devices that we have developed, which actually records this information and sends it on the system, it is developed in tandem with some of the largest solar inverter manufacturers around the world. For example, SMA from Germany, or which is like Delta Power, from Taiwan. So, these are the guys who have like gigawatt worth of solar inverter technology which is out there in the market. They've been doing this for more than 3 decades. So we told them that, we want to collect so-and-so information. They open up their ports. So we are working with them in order to collect the information. And we believe, that's a very credit because, we are talking of people who have been in businesses managing huge, large power plants for more than 3 decades around. So we believe their interfaces will be smart and clever enough. Then we have an internal team which is been working on using those ports and using those information to bring onto the platform that we ourselves have developed.
So that feels like it's part of the solution. Have you thought about leveraging social verification? Right. So if you get several actors all reporting the same information or commensurate information about what they're seeing relative to power usage, then you get some kind of social verification. If everyone has to trust the devices, then anyone can come along and hack the devices. Or a manufacturer can go, well, we'll give you most of the information. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think that's a great idea because already what we're doing is these guys are actually monthly on a billing basis. So what they actually do is they have their own localized meters sitting at their location and they can read whether, how much power they are getting, which means we send a bill using our device, but they can physically check whatever they are getting. So so based on what you just said, so when a day-to-day transaction can happen, these people can be given power to verify. So basically we have power consumer or user confirmed interactions which is going on. And clearly, that's a great idea which we can actually layer upon what we have already thought about. Sure.
So you mentioned these are rooftop solar power plants. How is that different than just regular solar panels? And do you have storage backup of all that extra energy that's generated? And then how does that work with the microgrid? Is that the people that are reliant on that, are they completely off the grid, or how does that interact with the regular grid?
To start with, none of these are actually off-grid. So, so the off-grid systems we only sell as a direct sale model. So we take the money and we sell it to the consumer. So all these are actually on-grid systems, which means if you have extra power, it goes back to the grid, using a technology called net metering. So we send it back to the grid. And in many geographies, that's really helpful to the grid as well, because our power plant generate extra power during the day when the demand is really high. So we send all that power to the distribution company when they need the most, and then when the power really costs them really high in the power exchange. And in the night when the power is cheap, they actually send it back to our systems or to our power consumers. So that's what's really happening. And and even within microgrid set, that is what is going to happen. So so power is going to go through the system as well as come into the system using the net metering technology to start with. We are also looking very keenly into battery technology as well as the storage technology, but as of now, it is not making economic sense because our major selling point is that our electricity is cheaper than the grid, and that is how it's going to be for the next 25 years. Generally, if you try selling a power plant, it takes 6 to 7 months to convince a guy. For us, it takes less than a day. We just tell them, you know what, you just sign the paper, we build the power plant, you have an assured energy at a fixed price for the next 25 years, which is cheaper even today. So that can't happen as of now with storage, but we are very confident that maybe we are just 5 or 6 years down the curve, wherein we can have our own storage, which can be part of the microgrid itself, so that our reliance on the existing grid keeps coming down and down.
Right, so with net metering, when you're pushing that power out back to the power grid, how does that get compensated back to the microgrid for all the people that are investing in that? Because if you have a home system and the net metering has that going back to the power supply, you get that money back for that. So how does that work with the microgrid situation?
Right. So guys, in the microgrid, basically what is happening is, these meters as of today reads plus and minus. So if you send it back, it reads minus. When you take it from the grid, it reads plus. So in microgrid, all that is going to happen is, so the whole thing will change to export and import, to be very fair. So so these devices, so these IoT devices, which are tied to the very net meters, will read how much got how much got exported and how much got imported. So so technically we will have a value of all the power which got exported from various different sources and how much everybody imported from the system. And yeah, so what you have to do is, the usage of all, plus the import, plus the export, plus the losses will be, will eventually lead to zero. So so we eventually know how much was exported by whom and at what time, and each consumer can decide at what price point they are ready to export. So you can say that, you know what, I don't need my power to get exported if the price is less than 7 cents. Now he can decide, I don't want power to be imported into my house if it is more than 6 cents, which means that transaction won't happen and your power will be just burned down to the ground. But next time you're clever enough and you say, you know what, last time nobody bought my power, so I'll bring that to 6 cents. He will eventually, so what will happen is, he won't even know what has really happened. Since your supply constraint has met his demand constraint, it just travels and the transaction really happens.
All right, we have time for one really quick question from the audience. Anybody? All right. There you go.
Hey, Robert Hicks, CED. I noticed you mentioned that some of the larger contractors, they open up ports to their network for you guys to run some testing. Is that correct?
Yeah, I said some of the large inverter manufacturers.
What do they do regarding security?
Okay, right, okay. That's like a long winding question. I probably won't, or probably I'll take it offline separately. Okay. But so what they've been doing is, all this while, to cut it short, they've been trying on their own to, bring into a microgrid kind of solution, but that's not what has happened as of now. But but what they are doing is, they have protocols in place so that, externally you can't feed in the network. And most importantly, they have a way to actually cross-check it with the physical meter. So which means if there is a difference in the reading which the physical meter shows, somebody can actually go and report it. Now, which actually means as of today, I will have to send somebody to see what is the difference, which is very similar to what actually Greg said. That there is a safe and secure environment, but at the same time, if somebody sees that there is some trouble, they can actually let the network provider, which is us, know that there is a difference. But as of now, somebody has to physically go and check what the difference is.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, Paramation is up next. We're going to do this in 2 minutes. We lost a minute there. And again, there are seats, so I'm going to point out 2 seats right up here and there if you guys want to come up from the back. All right, guys, we're going to go in 1 more minute. 1 minute. All right, I think we've almost got our judges back. While we're doing that, don't forget about the hashtag deal day. My understanding is we've already got a bunch of great photos and entrants in, so $500 in rock, hashtag deal day, put in there reflective and you'll be all set. Okay, we got all our judges. We are ready to go. So that being said, here we go with Paranation.
All right, hi everyone. My name is Calder Wong, and I'm excited to talk to you today about paramation. So, okay, so starting with our model, Paramation's core group is actually organized as a universal technology team for a couple different vertical projects with their own vertical business teams. So we're actually kind of handling multiple problems in multiple areas, but getting a lot of efficiency out of it by sharing the same tech team and a lot of the same technology. But I can kind of distill all of that down into a single problem statement, and that is that we believe that blockchain virtual machines need blockchain operating systems to enable their full potential. And that's a lot of what we're working on right now. So if you think of things like the EVM or an instance of the ROVM when it goes, it is a decentralized global computer. But they're pretty equivalent to the processors with some storage. And so what we're doing is building the other parts of the computer. So the motherboard, the hardware, and the software that ties that all together. And so with the end result being an operating system that can solve some serious security problems, as well as enable new utility for users and developers, and enable completely autonomous application architecture. So moving into an example, here's a problem. Mixing centralized architecture with decentralized applications is insecure. So centralized architecture is generally about securing networks and domain names, while decentralized architecture handles that with blockchains and economics. And so when you mix the two, you leave a soft underbelly open in your architecture that will honestly eventually be exploited, either intentionally or by accident. So to help that, I'm going to introduce our first app, which is called Ingress. And there's a video that does a little better job explaining what it does. So I'm going to cover the top parts. But basically what it does is it enables a dApp to be fingerprinted with a checksum. So it's front-end code and it's back-end code. And then it stores a dApp on distributed file systems like IPFS, DAT, and Swarm. And then the dApp's checksum and its metadata can then be registered to a smart contract, which acts like a decentralized and immutable form of a software certificate registry. So then on the user side, Ingress also acts as a gateway, and it serves dApps directly from distributed file systems and adds a couple security layers on top of it, one of them being actually checking the checksum of the code that's being loaded. And then it'll also do things like notify the user if there's a new dApp done by the same developer. And the last piece on it is that all of its data is actually stored on its own decentralized database, which allows other instances of Ingress to share the same data and act as nodes and be publicly verifiable. And Ingress also has an API open for dApp developers if they want to store some data off-chain, but still immutable and decentralized and have it searchable. So that was Ingress, and it's free and open source and live, so you guys can go use it and check it out if you want. So the next thing I want to talk about is AO, which is an information currency protocol. So if you think about cryptocurrencies as currencies that are secured by cryptography, then an information currency is a currency that is secured by the information underneath it. And the first thing we're doing with that is video on demand and live streams because it's super hard and it hits our goal, which is to be able to move and store zettabytes of data within a blockchain context. the next goal with that is to be able to actually deliver those bits to users faster than Netflix can, and tie all that together to power a currency that we believe will be more stable than the US dollar. So again, this is a video kind of demonstrating that. This is not live, or this is not public yet. But it kind of works by evolving how we think about persistence on a blockchain and combining it with other types of concepts from decentralized technologies. And it does that because it needs to be able to transact a currency super fast, but also maintain the integrity of the data underneath it within a public network. So there's some secret sauce to that, but I can give an idea of how that works. And it basically works by using an in-stream encryption scheme, and then pairing that with a layered decryption scheme, which allows the fragments of files to be uniquely encrypted and encoded for each node and each piece, which allows it to be transacted without giving up the underlying data. And then that's paired with a communication protocol that's modeled off of how DNA propagates over generations. And so those two things together allow the network to move bits really fast and keep them secure, and derive and secure a currency underneath it that is secured by the information of the uniqueness of the fragments in their encryption. So AO, that was in the video, is actually its skin, or it's like a dApp on top of a piece of software that we have spent a lot of time on called PM3. And the goal of PM3 is to take what you think of cloud services or cloud architecture, like this example for live streaming video, and actually combine it all into a single node application that can run locally, but then also be paired with other of its node applications in a decentralized network to enable more capabilities. There's no slide on there that we're missing, but the way that works, and for most of our professional careers on the tech side, we've been building technology platforms. And so we were thinking about creating a node framework or a node template. We really wanted to think about bringing the concept of a platform into a local application with a blockchain context. And so what that ends up looking like is every piece of functionality becomes an app derived from a blockchain. And each app has its own API, its own persistence, its own authentication, and its own rules. And those get knitted together within the application. And then that's paired with a message routing protocol that's universal, that kind of allows the node to accept third-party applications that we write or you guys write or whatever. And these applications can then access low-level APIs, like OS-level APIs that you normally can't do, which allows those apps to do more things and still work within a blockchain context. So we're using this architecture for another project, which is basically geared around doing health records and knitting them together in a giant database. And that would only be possible if we get the platform and security right. And so the takeaway here is that our projects are platforms out of the box, and that is super important to us because we know we can't do it alone. Our mission is to build an operating system for humanity. And we believe that if we all actually just keep doing what we're doing, having conversations like this, that we'll get to our vision. And our vision is a world where our species can organize itself in the most efficient and prosperous way for all.
Nice. Couldn't read some of that, but I'm old.
I'll send you that later.
You had started off by saying that you've got these vertical projects underneath this platform and that you're leveraging technology across them and the technology team. Can you give me some examples of shared technology between Ingress, AO, Alder, what was the other one? PM3.
Yeah, so I mean, I would
sort
actually
of what's next, right? Like, how are you gonna scale that platform?
Yeah, so I'm
they are.
actually missing the organizational diagram for the node. But if you saw that, what you'd see is these kind of just snap in place. You know, what we noticed when creating our business model was that there's a lot of really good ideas, right? There's a lot of people that are in their industry that have spent years there, kind of get it, they understand blockchain. But for every like project like that or one of those guys, they need to pair with a technology team that can develop within like a decentralized paradigm, which is actually much different than normal computer science. And you have to think differently. You have to think about security. You have to deal with smart contracts and networking that you normally wouldn't do. And so those two don't often find each other and add up. And then we also noticed that there's a lot of really common dependencies that all of these use cases really need to have that you really need to just you can build once and go after it. You know, like everyone needs to be able to transact stuff super fast, like our chain is doing. Everyone needs to be able to store things and be able to prove storage, but maybe not necessarily show it publicly. And so, like these things, this types of architecture is kind of how we're approaching it. When we're sharing technology, it's, you know, a lot of the projects have the exact same harder requirements. So build it once, plug it into a template, and you know the idea is to be able to build the verticals out much faster. Like if I were to say, like in the projects that we have, about 80% of the work is shared, but it's incremental to the blockchain space. About 20% of that is, you know, dropping UIs and you know, adding stuff on top of the template.
I have a follow-up question about AO, and thank you for the presentation. I think you did a great job of explaining that, you know, you're DApp hashing and storing those in IPFS, if I remember correctly. With AO, why did you choose to model your infocurrency protocol's encryption process after DNA genomics? You know, why follow Mother Nature's template in that regard, and what does that specifically solve?
Okay, I wasn't actually going to disclose this, but I'll talk about it. AO needs other blockchains like our chain and Ethereum, more secure blockchains to actually work. Because in order to be able to improve the scaling and to be able to store a bunch of stuff and be able to create a currency on the uniqueness of it, each node can't store the whole network, obviously. Each node can't store all videos. In fact, each node can't store you know, even like a small selection of it. And so in modeling the DNA propagation, right, what we're doing is basically creating a gene for each fragment of a file, which changes as it's moved through the network. So no file fragment is the same on any given node, even though it might be the same file. And that allows us to create a much shorter version of a blockchain for each fragment and create a proof, which is done by, at least right now, it's done by starting with a append-only ledger, secured, that's immutable on like a smart contract on Ethereum. You start there, and then you build a proof for the video on top of that. And as you go around, when you need to bring that currency back out or go into Ethereum, you just have to put the proof in there. It's much smaller and easier. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but
yeah. So as a follow-up to that, so for people, I have a minor in chemistry. I said neuroscience. I love this stuff, and I actually think Mother Nature has a lot of inspiration. But for folks, just for all of us, how would you, again, explain the value of following this template? What can't be done unless you go this route?
Well, what can we do down with? You can't. Let's see. You wouldn't be able to trace a genealogy back all the way up to its source and follow it all the way back down to whoever has the gene. So, we're talking about file fragment as a gene. That gene is passed off through a DNA model, where when you have a node sending a fragment, it's giving it to the node that's bringing it in, and that history is encoded into its genealogy. Does that make a little bit of sense? Okay.
Okay, thanks.
I had a question on AO as well. And just talking a bit about the stablecoin, you mentioned it, you introduced it, but you didn't really explain how using the uniqueness of information enables the stability of the token.
Yeah, I was hoping I'd get a question on that actually, because I don't have time to cover it. So the stability of the token, right? And in thinking about like what kind of currency we want to produce for AO and what kind of like the market needs is that, we want something that's like backed by something that works decentralized. And the only thing that you can possibly think to do that is the value of information. Like everything is abstract digitally, and so if you don't want to peg something or have a company involved or have an organization involved that's saying like, yeah, this is valuable, then you need to back it with something of value, and the only thing you can do with that is information. So, videos that's just ones and zeros in an order that has some value. And so the reason why we think it's going to be more stable than the U.S. dollar is because the network itself and the token itself is actually denominated in how we think about information. So it's actually a denominational coin that works from a byte to a megabyte, a kilobyte, to a zettabyte, all the way up. And so those things can be created and pushed together. And the token is actually how it's transacted on the network. So the network cost is paid for in the denomination of coin, which is denominated in information, and is denominated in size of data. And then the videos and content on the network are then actually priced in that same token. And so you kind of fold over, if the network's paying, it knows it needs this much to store this much of this size of a video on the network, and then it knows that it needs this much to be able to send that over, and that is static and flat. Then the price of the token should be basically the cost of how much it should cost to store information on a network and move it. And then as it's priced, that actually helps the stability of it, because people are then pricing their videos in, it might have a 10 megabyte video that's priced as a gig, and that's how it kind of folds over. I don't know.
Questions from the crowd?
Hi, I'm a developer. So if I want to leverage your framework, what sort of questions should I ask myself, whether I should use it or not?
Whether or not you should use it? Well, it depends on what you're doing, right? So like, if you're going to use it, you're probably going to be in a blockchain context, or you might be using it for other things. Like, really, why we're building the template and the platform for it is because we want to abstract away the necessity to use stuff like oracles. We actually hate those, and so we think that like, if there's any part of your application or any part of your idea that needs to send information to a blockchain, and the blockchain is going to rely on that information to execute, we don't want that to come from centralized architecture web. But you could use the same application to do things like subscribe, where you could wrap in a whole bunch of cryptocurrency wallets or a bunch of chains inside the framework, and then pair it with other logic, and then maybe push it to a centralized DB somewhere else. So it really just depends on what you're doing. And we can talk later, because we really want to talk to more devs to talk about how to, what tools we want to put there first.
Time for one more question. Missing somebody? Is that it? All right, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, we're going to take just a 5-minute break here, and then we'll be right back. Rumble Monkey is up in 3 minutes. All right, everybody, we got about 2 minutes. Let's get to eats in 2 minutes. Okay, everybody, can we start to find our seats? Let's find our seats, guys. Thank you. All right, everybody, judges, could we get you to the stand? To the stand. That's funny. Judges, if we could get you up here. Audience, please find a seat. Hey, I've had a lot of people that have come up to me that are saying, hey, how can I talk to the companies? How can I get involved with them? Whether that is on the investment side and helping them, or services, or just some sort of advice, whatever you've got. So on each of your seats, there was one of these cards. So if you just go to that URL that's on there, the same one that you can be filling out information. If that doesn't work, find one of us at Reflective. We will be sure to get you, or to track down the folks that are here. They're going to be here afterwards as well for all of you guys to talk to. So I'll give you another few seconds to sit down. Here comes one of our last judges, and we're ready to go. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Rumble Monkey.
Thank you. Hi. So before I get started, I just want to thank Kenny and Rudy from our chain, as well as Kevin and Greg for their help in getting us here, and everyone else at Reflective. So we're Rumble Monkey, and we are a platform that enables real money play for competitive video games and esports. And what that means is a sort of a set of player-focused tools which enable gamers to play money matches. A money match would be as if we were playing pool, and you put down $20 and I put down $20, winner take all. So we're a small company. We're around 6 people right now. I brought Jeff with me. He's our principal engineer, comes from Microsoft as well as MetaBright and a few other startups. Myself, I've been a serial entrepreneur. I've done 2 other startups before this one. Both were successful exits and acquisition. And we have a pretty interesting team of advisors, including Jonathan Wilkins, who is a co-founder and CSO of Blockstream, as well as Greg Landis, one of our advisors who's in the audience here. He was general counsel at AT&T as well as Vulcan. And I want to say, I think the thing about our team that's most interesting to me is we have competitors, but most of the competitors are gamers who are trying to figure out this space, or they are maybe MBA people who see value in this space. We are computer scientists who like to game. So we're really bringing all of our experience in computer science and kind of leveraging it towards the space. So this is probably one of the more interesting slides to me. And what it's talking about is really the growth of both esports as well as the derivative market of esports cash gambling worldwide. What's fascinating is right now esports is about 500 million. That's mostly ticket sales, media rights, things like that. And then when we're talking about esports cash gambling, that's actually only a portion of the gambling market that's happening. The larger gambling market by 2020, which is what this slide is showing, will actually be $33 billion if you calculate on digital assets like skins and things like that. So what's fascinating is while esports is growing to 1.5, the derivative market right now is going to be multiple of that. And so why is this kind of interesting, right? Well, it turns out that gamers really like playing for real money. And the challenge has been there aren't a good set of tools out there that have enabled this. Most of the ones that exist, they're high friction, they're manual. I don't know how many people in this audience are gamers who've tried to play for real money, but it's really difficult. So you'll see things on Twitch like Twitch streamers PayPaling each other. You'll see websites that are based on an honor system where I say I won, he says he won, and then we both have to agree. If we don't agree, there's just repudiation and the whole system breakdown. So what is Rumble Monkey, right? Rumble Monkey is basically an automated way to securely play money matches. And we're doing that by running alongside the game and observing the game. So what's happening is 2 players who want to play a game, when that game starts, we're figuring out that they're both Rumble Monkey users, they have adequate funds in their account, and then we're performing an escrow process. We're then watching that gameplay as it occurs and checking for consensus along the way. Now that's really critical, right? Because you don't just want the end of the game to be a consensus checkpoint. You want to know in a 45-minute game if someone is doing something, improper. You want to know in minute 5, not in minute 45. And then at the very end, we're going to settle that contract, right? So we've taken this escrow from the players, they've put in all their money, we've observed the game, and we're going to disperse those funds. And then critically, they're going to accrue positive reputation. So the system itself is designed to reward players, for participating in the system well and be good actors. Why is this interesting for blockchain? I'd honestly say that I think this is kind of a no-brainer, to be honest. If you start thinking about the problem space itself, and you're talking about escrow, and you're talking about an untrusted pool of people, and you're talking about how to secure those funds, blockchain seems like a very natural fit. I think it's also really interesting if you step back and think about blockchain as a database technology, right? So blockchain as a database technology is really good at certain things. It's good at permanence. It's good at being immutable. It's good at time sequencing. These are all challenges that we have in this space. So if we weren't using blockchain, even if there was no hype around it, even if there was no interest in it, we would basically have to spend a lot of time recreating those same structures in order to be able to get the benefits of blockchain. I think Rumble Monkey itself is a sort of layer 2 technologies. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Lightning Network. I won't go too deep into that, but there's a bit of secret sauce. But you can think about it as if you were to take the approach of Lightning, but apply it to this specific problem space of near real-time transactions that are more complicated than simply sending someone $5, right? And more of the sort of specific escrow situation that we're dealing with. And then you got rid of things like hubs and you didn't have watch hours and so on and so forth. That would be what the Rumble Monkey network looks like. It's very interesting for an ICO, we think, as well, mainly because you've got pretty much a straightforward utility token. So our business model, it's very straightforward. The winner pays 10%. It's important to note that the winner and not the loser is paying money. And as you can see, it scales up pretty quickly. We're talking about, out of 2.6 available customers playing 3 games a week for $5, we would stand up at $200 million. When we look at other games like Hearthstone or Fortnite, I'm not sure what happened to the logo there, but you can see that the cash revenue scales up very quickly with minimal penetration. And this is because it's really about a high frequency of small transactions, right? And anytime you take a market like transportation, which is large with buses and expensive, and you make it smaller and personal and higher frequency, like Uber, you see these kinds of effects of scale. So our current traction, we are supporting Hearthstone right now. We're in closed beta with almost 5,000 users. We have a monthly active of 1,500 right now. We have a mailing list with over 22,000 emails on it. And I don't know how many of you are marketing people, but we have an ad conversion rate of 45%. We're in strategic discussions right now with the STARS Group, formerly known as PokerStars. We're also talking to Activision Blizzard, Ubisoft, Cygames, all very supportive of what we're doing and very interested in what we're doing. This is really about scaling up for them. They want to see us grow. So what is our ask? We're looking for 1.5 million. It would cover operations for 18 months. To date, we've raised a little under 2 million. Our lead investor is Paul Moritz. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. I'm guessing you are. Yeah, so thanks.
Is each peer-to-peer bet that takes place its own smart contract?
I would say it would be fair to characterize it that way. I would also say that we generally don't like to use the word bet. This is kind of a nuance. It turns out we don't, this is actually really kind of an important point. So we don't have a good word in the English language for what we're doing. We talk in terms of betting and wagering. From a legal perspective, that's actually very different than what we're doing. A key point of RumbleMonkey is, unlike gambling, which is where you're putting money on the outcome of something you can't control or predict, this is putting money on a skill-based game where you yourself are the participant. As a result, we're outside of that regulatory framework and legal.
Quick question from me, Jacob. So you mentioned Lightning Network. Thanks for bringing that up, because as you described the 45-minute sessions, I was thinking, oh, that's very similar to having just 8 channels open for that 45 minutes and at the end reconciles. Mm-hmm. So, why wouldn't someone come along and build this on a Lightning Network on a different chain? Why RumbleMonkey built on our chain instead of Rumble Lightning Network on another chain?
Yeah, I can get into that to a point, but what I would say is that Lightning Network, is designed around how are you Venmo, right? So you have a lot of actors, you're doing very simple transactions. This is more like if you think about a characterization of poker hand, right? You're really talking about a complex transaction where you would have, an immediate escrow, you have players buying in, you then have actions per card, per hand, per so and then a settlement. It's a level of complexity that Lightning is just not designed for. And I want to be really clear. The RumbleMonkey network is not designed to be an all-purpose, financial solve world hunger solution, right? It is financial tech for gamers, but it's directed at a very, very focused problem set. There are, I think, many applications of sort of a similar kind of problem space, but again, this is not designed to compete with Lightning Network. It's really designed to be something that would run alongside or possibly even on Lightning Network.
Do you have any questions from the crowd?
So what is the procedure when one side cheats?
So that's a good question, right? And we think that it kind of depends what the cheat is. It's a little bit complex because in certain games, how you define cheating changes. In some games, maybe rage quitting is kind of a form of cheating or an attempt at cheating. In most instances, what we're doing is looking at a particular game and deciding based on the properties of that game what would constitute a forfeit, for example, right? So is your cheat such that, I'm DCing, as a result, I'm trying to get out of this contract, right? In which case we would flush funds to the other party. Generally speaking, though, we have kind of a philosophy where we realize, and this kind of comes from, I think, a little bit of experience with InfoSec, you can't stop people from cheating, right? They're always going to find a way. But what you can do is try to figure out that they're doing it after the fact. And that's really where the reputation comes in and where it's sort of critical, right? So while we may not be able to detect that someone is cheating somebody else like at that exact moment, we should be able to detect it going back, looking at statistical anomalies, right? So for example, if you're a player, you might have, a normal rate of disconnect, I don't know, however many games, and 5 games a month, right? If you're disconnecting at 500 games a month, it's probably a problem. part of the network is designed to give other players the ability to see into that, right? So before you're playing someone else for money, you'll have some sense of their play history as well as sort of their overall network reputation. So it's not completely blind, right? You can go on there and play someone, let's say, presumably for $1 million if they've never played for money before and so on and so forth. You're assuming that risk, but I would assume most people would have probably a different risk tolerance. And they might look for players who have built up a reputation over time.
So one competitor that I interviewed like 2 years ago was like First Blood.
I know those guys.
Do you want to comment on the comparisons between systems or not this time? And then secondly, if you want to answer that question, will this be integrated or could be used, like the big tournaments are like the World Cyber Games or the Cups, like where they're like $1 million on the line. So you want to comment on how this potentially will be?
Yeah, so I've actually met the First Blood guys. They're great guys, but I would say what we're doing is pretty different. It would take a little bit of time to get into kind of the weeds as to why, but the high-level takeaway is, what they're looking at, again, is by and large generally a manual process or a process that's outside of a set of tools for players. Most companies, I would say, are focused on, as those guys generally are, on a set of tools for tournament organizers. So they're kind of looking at it as the other way, which is to say, hey, people want to get together on a Saturday and organize a tournament, right? I think that getting together on a Saturday and organizing a poker tournament while it happens, it's time intensive, right? And it's a big commitment, for a given player. What we're focused on is it's Friday night, you've got $20, and you'd like to make some sushi money.
Given the ability for users to quit while also having a reputation assigned to them, how do you go about handling identity on the platform?
So that's a really good question. And the answer is that I think there's a couple things to note. One is that this network is not designed to enable anonymous transactions, first of all, right? So if you're looking to RumbleMonkey as a great means of money laundering, you should probably look somewhere else because there's a lot easier ways to do it. What we're looking at over time is you're going to establish your identity as a certain player. That player is going to be linked to various gaming accounts. So in the case of Hearthstone, it's linked to your battle tag, right? That's kind of a one-off thing. You can't have multiple accounts linked to multiple battle tags in the system, right? So it's creating essentially a unique tuple. Once that's happened, over time, the system itself is tracking all of these events, right? The contracts you've entered into, the result of those contracts, and so on and so forth. So you're sort of building your identity, as sort of a function of participating on the network, right? Eventually, you could say, well, how do you deal with I'd say like an edge case of you've got someone who's really good or someone who's really bad, right? And their brother's really awesome or their sister's amazing, and they're just going to sit inside their sit in their seat. We think that eventually with enough data, you can actually do some really interesting, and I hate to use the buzzword here, but some interesting machine learning. You can start looking at the actual play style of a player. It turns out that if you look at gamers like I don't know if anyone's here familiar with gait analysis for identity recognition, but it turns out that the way that you walk is pretty unique, right? It also turns out that the way you do a lot of things is pretty unique, right? So while two people can play poker, the exact speed at which you play certain cards, put them down, location, so on and so forth, the timings between those things, we think over time can provide a more unique fingerprint. Did that answer your question?
One more.
I think the potential for something like this is really awesome, but do you mind talking a little bit about how you would judge, like with the participants, similarly to how people use Twitch, sort of just watch for entertainment? Is the platform designed so you would have a match that would be compensated for the winner and it's open to anyone to sort of watch it and judge, or who is designated the deciders of who's the winner?
Yeah, so that's also a really good question. I can't comment in detail because it's a little bit secret sauce, but what I would say is that one of the technologies we're introducing is a mechanism by which if you assume that everyone in this room is untrusted and trying to cheat you, we have a way to have one person act as essentially a Well, the word we're using is ephemeral trust, right? So a temporary trusted third party for the purposes of that transaction. Now, what's interesting is the consensus that's actually taking place is between both players as well as this party themselves.
I'm wondering, do you have thoughts about attracting games built on a platform like Archain to directly include your? You see what I'm saying? If you plan for success, what's the plan for success, and in particular for future games, especially blockchain-aware games?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. So I think that there are essentially kind of two major roads ahead, right? One of them is taking existing games and layering real money on top of them. And I want to be really clear, outside of regulated jurisdiction like Las Vegas, you're limited to what you can do, right? In Las Vegas, you can take a game and you can make, whatever crazy asymmetric bet you want, right? I hit 10 blocks in Mario under 10 seconds and win $100. That's great. Outside of Vegas, that doesn't work. So the games have to have certain qualities, like they have to be competitive, there has to be a clear win condition, and so forth. That said, I think there's a really interesting sort of future concept around games that are built around these real money mechanics from the ground up. Now, not to deviate, I know I'm kind of short on time, so I'll try to speed this up fast. We had an interesting thought, which was, hey, we've been layering real money in some of these games. We've been looking at the interaction and sort of the amount of excitement that we're seeing. It's super high, the engagement's high. What happens if we take this model and we build a game around it? So we actually developed in a few months kind of a very simple game. I don't know if anyone's played Gungeon, but it's similar to Arena Gungeon. So just top-down shooter. It was a very simple mechanic, $1 per life. If you killed someone, you get their dollar. If you die, they got your dollar, right? We called it Dollar Kill Club. We took it to South by Southwest. We had a $5 buy-in. First-time users, on average, put in $25 into the game. So that's into a game they've never even seen before. A third of our users were putting $250 a day into this game. Interestingly, we had a guy come on day 2. He showed up with $5 randomly. He left with $463. He was there before it opened the next day. And left with about $600. And what's fascinating actually about this, I think longer term in thinking about vision, honestly, is the idea that you can really create sort of this economy around playing games in a way that you haven't been able to enable, historically, right? This kid was making roughly $100 an hour doing something that he would be doing anyway. And the best part about it was, for him to win $600, I didn't have to lose $600. Right? Like that win and that loss was amortized across the entire player base, which is really kind of what you're looking for in long term. I think I'm out of time, so thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Next token's up next. Okay, we're going to get going here in just a minute as soon as the next token guys are up. We've got 2 to go. That's 4 down, just 2 more. Okay, we're going to go in 1 minute. All right, we're going to get going here in just a second. You got the clicker?
Oh, yeah, the old version of PowerPoint.
Is that the old one?
Yeah, this is the first one.
Hey, can we get the UMatch guys up here? We're going to do a quick technology switch here. So UMatch, if you're out there. All right, guys, second to last, here we go with UMatch.
Thanks. Hello. It's good to be here. My name is Johnny Dabowski. This is my co-founder, Ivan Galanin, from UMatch, where we are building a collaborative AI ecosystem for democratic healthcare. It's a democratic health AI. Ivan and I have very different backgrounds, and yet we share a similar path towards doing audacious things. And Ivan actually raised almost $55 million to treat a dozen ultra-rare disease patients. I like to call him a dropsphilia jockey. And I've had a career in music and environmental management and also developing health system platforms. Now, we share in the pursuit of wishing for a democratic health AI. Health AI is going to be huge. And we're at the mercy of Google and Apple and Amazon, who would be more than happy to continue siloing our data, our personal data. And if that would present an outcome that made for the best health AI system, that would be great. But we believe that there's something better. And unfortunately, the healthcare ecosystem is designed so that it's only people who have the right hardware or the right background and training that are able to extract knowledge from these ecosystems. And we believe that it's ownership plus tools that will create the democratization that leads to a truly democratic health AI. And this is only possible with the right blockchain. And our chain actually has built all of the right elements into their ecosystem upon which we can build a system that truly returns ownership of data to the individuals contributing. And with the right tools, we can unlock an amazing amount of value. We're building ramps and not fences. We need to open up the ownership of our data, but most people are not going to want to become data taggers or structure their own data. So our first use case is for a regular person to contribute their data. We call them the data owners. It needs to be simple for them to just contribute all of the data into a blob and then see some benefits of that ecosystem. So this introduces us to the next person in our stakeholder group, the taggers. And taggers are knowledge workers. But we don't envision a Amazon Turk knowledge worker ecosystem, which is almost a race to the bottom. And it actually makes knowledge work pretty miserable work. We've turned knowledge work into a game of tag. We actually have built upon successful games in tagging genomics data and semantic data so that high school students and college students can participate in a game, and in doing so, they're helping the data owners to improve and structure their data. And this brings us to the complex AI algorithms and the immense amount of training in mathematics and in computer science, which is required to build an effective AI healthcare system. And because these modelers are so rare, we've actually created an ecosystem where they can contribute towards this greater democratic healthcare AI and get rewarded for it and get paid for it. We also have introduced several new ideas which make this a really exciting venture. So we built our first app which actually sonifies healthcare data. It turns into music a cancer patient's data. So you can listen to the track and hear where the mutation is in the track. And this type of ecosystem, converting data into music, opens up an incredible multi-dimensional array of data. And what we've found in our partnerships with My Personal Therapeutics and at Mount Sinai is that this unlocks patterns that we wouldn't have otherwise seen. As a practitioner, as an oncologist, staring at multiple sheets of data, you go blind from looking at this two-dimensional flat data. But suddenly, when you convert it into sound, you hear patterns that you wouldn't have otherwise seen. And so stepping back, when this runs through our ecosystem and runs through projects like Archain's platform and hardware, which is optimized for speed and efficiency, it doesn't just come back to us to make us a lot of money. It comes back to a cooperative model. So our cooperative builds revenue from the different patterns that it's discovering. So if we rebuild the ecosystems that are in traditional healthcare. So if we take like Flatiron and Foundation Medicine, they have 30,000 cancer records, which out of 15 million cancer patients, it's a decent amount of records. However, there's no way to communicate with the patient. So if they want to follow up in a study and reach out to a patient, there's no way of doing this. There's no way of adding additional data into the patient's record, and there's no way to connect this to any sort of further work. So in our ecosystem, we're able to create a communication stream that works between the patient and the modeler and the stakeholder so that through these ongoing revenue streams, we can build really rich models. So our cooperative revenue comes from curated data, from token curated registries, from subscriptions, and from royalties. So in this way, we can look at some competitors like DocAI, and we have a lot of places where UMatch has a superior platform. But really, we see this as a co-opetition model, where we're really competing with Amazon and Google and all of these platforms. So the more the merrier. If we can bring all of these projects into one roof, then we will have an opportunity to truly build democratic healthcare AI. We're self-funded to date with 30 plus modules built across 20 blockchains, and we're raising $450,000 primarily to build the Totem Personal Data Blob plugin. This will be realized over 3 months and 10 events where we'll educate through the full stack of these opportunities to take a patient and a knowledge contributor and a modeler and a tagger through the entire process to show how this is a more beneficial business model as we return the power to the individual users and create cumulative effects. And these initial implementations will be in cancer and wellness, but this extends significantly beyond to environmental impact and to sleep data and to all sorts of patient data. Thanks for your time.
I had an initial question on the business model. Could you mind going back to the slide? It wasn't exactly clear to me exactly what it was. So I see, there's revenue opportunities, but not how any of that actually gets attained?
Sorry, can you clarify?
How do you make money? I mean, like, literally. So I see what a subscription is, but a subscription, who is the purchaser?
Yeah,
of this?
why would anyone subscribe?
Or like, yeah, but who is the actual like subscriber?
So it's going to differ by co-op to co-op. So for example, in cancer, the earliest revenue will be from purchase of cancer data, and there's an insatiable appetite for data, especially high-dimensional data of the type that we're going to be getting. So microbiome data, sleep data, diet, nutrition, everything that a connected owner can contribute. We're going to have a unique set from day one that these other siloed approaches won't have. So we'll have companies buying the data. But we also expect to be surprised by the cancer community in terms of individuals who want to subscribe to curation for what should I be eating? How do I deal with anxiety? There's been a couple of new consumer cancer startups actually in the last few months. So I think we'll be surprised by how much individual subscriptions we'll actually get.
Also, token curated registries are a great way to demonstrate this effect through curation and through subscription. So just like you can subscribe to an RSS feed, we can demonstrate the value of these combined groups, these cohorts, in a token curated registry model. Without ICO or our own token, we can build on top of existing platforms like OurChain. And because the semantics of our knowledge representation and knowledge sharing ecosystem are designed in a similar functional programming foundation with the same concept for the tuple spaces and throwing your data into a blob and then having a whole separate group of knowledge workers be able to enrich that data, all the participants working together can generate value, which raises the value of the token curated registry as a financial instrument.
Thanks. I had one more question. Some of the information that you're talking about that would be collected from people, patients, would be from some sort of device. So you mentioned, Apple or Amazon as two entities that you would like to compete against, but to a degree, they're also the device manufacturers that are now, sort of plugged in on people every day collecting health data. So how do you assure that the data that's collected ends up not being sort of, misused by Apple and stays private within the cooperative network?
It's a great question. So using the DID identity model and using things like homomorphic encryption and zero knowledge proofs, each user can set the parameters and willingness that they are to share data with different people. So they can have even temporary keys where they grant access to certain people, but because they're locked in their identity model to the data, they have provenance and they can turn on and off permissions to who's using the data, and they can use the token curated registries and things like in Keybase, where you have the rules embedded in the folder that's sharing the data. If any sharing happens outside the parameters of the smart contract, and this is where OurChain's Rolang and the rich semantics of the OurChain smart contract compiler, we can use proof of correctness to embed before someone even uploads the data to make sure that the rules are set, and then if someone breaks those rules, the key will be revoked.
Thank you for that. I think I was going to ask a little bit about privacy and protections for those folks who submit data. So I think you explained that. But talk a little bit about what you're going to do to protect the integrity of the data set and keep people from submitting fraudulent information.
That's a great question. So using some of the same technical parameters, we're able to set up very rigorous rules for how you submit. So now, repeatability is a really important thing in this type of data science. So also using the, comparing hashes of data sets to see if this matches the original data, and we can get to a place where we're actually able to prove that the data that comes out was the data that was put in, and embedding the rules into the smart contracts before and after, we can say this absolutely did or did not happen. So we can use that proof of correctness on both sides of the import and export.
On the token curator registry, did you say there were going to be sort of what is it, health tips and like what is actually being curated in there?
So the best example of that may be in something as mundane as beauty. So right now you actually have businesses where people can submit their questions to dermatologists and have the, get advice on skincare. So for example, we would have expert dermatologists and or individual beauty power users who would provide advice to people through token curated registries, and or companies who want to introduce products in the beauty community. They'll say, okay, I have a yes or no question. Does my product do X? And then the curators will get the opportunity to resolve those questions, and then the company puts a stake in order to get that question curated. And the results are then available to the community to say, oh, these experts review this product, provided an outcome, and now that knowledge is available to that co-op community.
And using some of the staking and bonding methods, we also can use reputation as credit in the system. So when you combine reputation with rich data that's been verified, you start to have a combination where this, you're subscribed to this curated list, which is maybe beauty tips, but it's also generating insights from oncologists and from experts, and in each level, people are able to prove how effective their advice has been in the past.
We'll take a few questions from the crowd.
So as an owner, generally people don't have their own medical records. It's usually an electronic medical record that's owned by the hospital or by their family clinic. How are you guys going to help facilitate uploading that data so that you can do some work on that?
Yeah, so hospitals are moving through patient portals to give access to individuals for their data. I don't know how pervasive it is, but it's becoming more and more common. So I was in Vermont recently, in Airbnb, and the host can go to their portal and get their data. And I said, well, are you worried if you switch that you'll lose that data? And so something like what we're offering to patients would be a solution. They could have their electronic health records from the portal put on something that they control.
Right, so how do you plan on merging that data? So are you going to be providing some sort of APIs or interfaces so that you can actually get that data exported out?
Yeah, and we have to comply with HIPAA regulations. So there are HIPAA compliant importers and exporters, and using some new key-based code, you can actually revoke the keys to files so that it expires after 2 days. And this also helps to solve the problem if someone's computer gets lost and it had a key on it. You can have these keys be revocable, and also building on top of a platform like our chain, we're not trying to make an entire reputation system just for our product. We count on the much stronger reputational system that would be in an R-chain community, so that this only gets to happen once per user, that they're setting up the importers and exporters and rules.
Anything else from anybody? All right, thank you very much, guys. Got the last one, it takes token. Okay. 2 minutes, we're going. All right, hopefully he'll get us, yeah. And he's got it, yeah. Well, I'm glad you guys noticed that, yeah.
It would have been a little weird in like the third slide.
Like, what just happened? Yeah. Yeah, that makes you think on your feet, though. That's for sure.
Yeah, like any business thing, I'd be able to
It's
pivot
been
right.
real confusing.
Yeah. No, that was good. And those guys stepped in and, they did good. You doing it right off the thumb drive? All right. Hey, Shahan. So with Encrypt, do you want to introduce them or do any?
Yeah, I can share that.
So as soon as they're done, let's get the judges out and do it, and maybe we'll hit our 2 o'clock thing. So we'll do that. Does this look better? Yeah, that's right. Click through a couple of them to make sure, guys, that's the one. Yep. That look right? Okay, guys, we're going in 30 seconds. Okay, we have our judges in place. We are all ready to go. So this is our final presentation. After this, the judges will go away for a few minutes. We're going to have Decrypt come up and talk in that time gap that we've got there. We're going to try to get you guys out of here at 2 o'clock like scheduled. So here we go. Here's Tick Token.
As a freshman in college, I learned the hard way that the ticketing marketplace is incredibly inefficient. As a way to make money on the side, I was buying and selling Seahawks tickets on their run to the Super Bowl. And when the playoffs came, I ended up selling a ticket or buying tickets for $600 and reselling them the next day for $1,200, only to find out on the day of the game that the tickets I had bought and sold were fake. It was a pretty expensive learning lesson for me, and that's why we're building SmartTix, a blockchain-based ticketing protocol. Our team consists of Matt, Steve, and Esther. So our goal is to change the way that digital tickets are bought, sold, and collected. We have a firm belief that people don't use decentralized applications because they're decentralized. They'll use applications because they love the app and it overall makes their life better. We want to bring blockchain technology to people without them knowing they're actually using the blockchain so that they can reap benefits. There's currently 3 problems that plague the industry, and the first is fraud. Last year alone, there was over 5 million counterfeit tickets sold, resulting in over $200 million in damages to customers. Second is fees. The average ticket goes down the supply chain about 7 times, and the consumer ends up paying, on average, 38% more than the ticket issuer actually intended. And the third problem is fairness. The ticket issuer isn't reaping any of the rewards of the secondary market. For example, if you go to a Seahawks game and you buy a ticket for $100, and the next day it's worth $400, the only person benefiting from that is the reseller. These are all problems that we're trying to fix with SmartTix.
So the solution is this digital ticketing protocol automated through smart contract. Essentially what that means is we're taking each ticket and creating a non-fungible digital asset for you to hold on to. This eliminates fraud because users will be able to verify the authenticity of any ticket they purchase or intending on purchasing. We can also eliminate fees by spreading out a negligible transaction cost throughout every transaction. So instead of a consumer facing a 30% upcharge on the face value of their ticket, they can see a 5% transaction fee one time every time they transact the ticket. Additionally, we'll eliminate middlemen, thus reducing the overall cost of tickets by allowing users to exchange and sell tickets confidently without having to use security of a secondary ticketing exchange. So how it works, a venue will use our platform to create and generate their tokens. Then users will browse events through the app, purchase with US dollars or crypto, and then receive their ticket tokens in the app, the built-in wallet, which allows them to view the history of the ticket, resell it, transfer it, or give it to their friends. The last year, the primary ticket market sold over 138 million tickets. By the time it reaches the secondary market, it'll change hands on average 7 more times, thus resulting in over 800 million potential transactions in the US alone. This is something that current blockchains can't scale to, which is why we're seeking Archain as a potential solution. Digital collectibles grew to $50 billion, which will also be key in generating our ancillary revenue. So by using our platform, fans will primarily be protected from fakes and credit card fraud. They'll experience lower service fees and have increased buying power. For venues, this is key in obtaining direct access to the secondary market, which is something they've never been able to do before. And they'll be able to receive, so in the event of a crisis, which is something that's becoming more and more common, they'll be able to have a list of all the people in their venue based on the data associated with the ticket that was sold. So our business model primarily generates revenue through the transaction fee built in the smart contract. What this does is it allows every time the ticket moves, a percentage of that fee to be sent back to the original ticket issuer, so the venue in this case. We can license the smart ticks protocol, which would allow venues or existing players in the market, such as StubHub or Ticketmaster, to implement an ERC 721, effectively non-fungible token wallet into their existing wallets in their apps, which would allow them to transact our ticket tokens and increase revenue for us and them as well. And then additionally, part of the ancillary revenue, events and promoters can advertise on the platform, and users will be able to convert their digital tickets into a physical collectible after the event.
And then touch on the competitors a little bit. We talked about Ticketmaster and StubHub, how they charge ridiculously high fees, but we want to talk a little bit more about the on-chain solutions that are being built right now. And that kind of starts with Guts, BlockTix, and Eventus. What they've done is create an ERC20 token, which we believe fails to capture the correct use of blockchain. You can use their token on their app to basically buy tickets and use it as a medium of exchange. So you can use it for protocol access fees, voting fees, but there's no digital asset tied to their tokens. And then Block Party, they are using a non-fungible approach on Ethereum, but their big downfall is that they don't allow you, once you buy it, to sell it and buy it on secondary marketplaces. And we're firm believers that you should be able to do whatever you want with your assets, whether you buy it or sell it later on.
Yeah. So for our project, we're planning to raise $1.5 million. It's a simple idea, and a little goes a long way. And most of this fund is planned to be spent on development, project development, and we're not doing ICO.
All right, do we have any questions?
What's your go-to-market strategy for working with the venues, Live Nation, the likes, et cetera?
So the idea isn't to directly compete with Live Nation, Ticketmaster, and StubHub, because those are players that have, in one way or another, a monopoly over the entire market. We're in a unique position here where, as a startup and a small business, we can prove this concept through smaller venues. We currently have in place a proof of concept that we're going to work with universities such as University of Washington. And what we're going to do is we're going to basically prove the concept with smaller events and allow and then be able to white label this service to players like Ticketmaster and StubHub, who then aren't necessarily in a position to be experimenting with their market with something like this.
So I also noticed that I didn't really see artist or performer or entertainer throughout the deck. They're the ones who are also really thinking about the fact that their tickets are sold multiple times and they see no cut. How are you addressing their concerns?
So for us, the way the ticketing industry works right now is an artist will work with their promoter and go to the venue, and the starting price for a ticket is set by the artist, and they don't necessarily care about seeing revenue from the ticket sales and marketing because they're setting how much they want to be paid through the face value of the ticket. Here, what we're really interested in is incentivizing venues and resellers to reduce their initial fees, so that when you go on Ticketmaster and you try to buy a ticket, you don't end up seeing the ticket being $50, and then by the time you're done checking out, it's $90 from fees you don't know where they're going to. Instead, what we're trying to do is we want to use the smart contract to implement a low transaction fee that gets spread out across every transaction from the primary throughout the secondary market, so that instead of one person paying 40%, you've got the 7 people contributing 5% every time. And the unique part of that too is by the time the ticket moves throughout the secondary market, the ticket is usually 40% higher than the original face value. So the transaction costs will scale and generate more and more revenue, with still being a relatively small amount to the actual ticket value.
I have a little follow-up on the business model. So the value prop for the end user's pretty clear. safer, cheaper, all that. On the other side of the equation, you've got the Seahawks, and they've got their current method of distributing tickets and making profit and all of that. Are they going to see the same amount of profit that they see now if they use this system, or are they going to have to take less?
Ideally, they'll be able to see more, because right now, say the Seahawks, for example, when they sell a ticket, the only part of that transaction and lifespan of the ticket that they see revenue from is the initial primary sale. So the Seahawks will partner with Ticketmaster and say, we want to sell this amount of this many tickets. The artist has set the face value at $50. We're going to add our fee as $5 on top of that, and then take this template. So they'll give that to Ticketmaster, and then they can do whatever they want with that ticket and add on whatever prices they want. So for the venue, for someone as the Seahawks, they're already incentivized just for their image to keep their fees fairly low, because they want to allow the everyday consumer access to their event. That's a big issue among event planners and artists in finding the balance between a profitable ticket price, something that will match the market value, but also keeping a price that's accessible to the majority of consumers. Does that answer your question?
A quick question there on the market. A great job with articulating your understanding of the problem, and your product clarity seems to be very good. You mentioned 800 million transactions in the U.S. annually. What expectations do you have about capturing slices of that 800 million over the next X years? So by when do you anticipate potentially having a chunk of that? What would that chunk look like?
So by the time we would reach the 800 million transaction, by reaching that is when we would roll out the white label platform after we prove the concept. So the way we have it here is working with small event venues such as Benner Royal Hall, someone who's got 2,500 seats. They're doing on average about 70 events per year. And so just the smaller event market is something that we can tap into and see a lot of growth from. If you look here, it's kind of rough revenue forecast. Once we get to about 1 million plus ticket sales or ticket transactions, because this doesn't include just the primary tickets, it includes every time the ticket is transacted, even between people. That's when we start to see a big separation between revenue and then transactions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great job, guys. So quick question. So it looks like in your business model, this could be a tool for, let's say, Ticketmaster or one of these big agencies to work with you later. If you look at the trends, artists, creators are becoming more empowered through these different technologies and platforms. Is there a play to go direct to consumer? Because it seems like an artist to consumer, because it seems like that's the direction and that's the trend that we're going. So I was wondering if there was a play there as well.
Yeah, that's something that we actually see a lot of value in the future is for a consumer's experience when using our app, what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to upload some sort of KYC information, their name, their address, their credit card to be able to purchase the tickets. What we want to do is we want to be able to allow fans to add a certain amount of information into the built-in wallet where they can send out their information to artists. So one big thing that Taylor Swift, for example, does is they have this verified fan program where users can interact with the artists and like their social media pages, give them a certain amount of information, and the result is they'll receive about 3 emails a week saying, hey, buy this merchandise, buy your ticket. And it allows them early access to buying the event ticket, which is key in removing scalpers and bots from the ecosystem, and also ensuring that fans receive tickets at the face value that the artists want. Because a problem for artists is that they might set their ticket at $50, but by the time it goes through the supply chain, it's at $150. And that's not what they want. They don't want to tap into they want to be able to have everybody go to their show. And so what we want to be able to do is allow fans to securely give their information to artists for this verified fan program, but not have to do it every single time on every single website. We want them to be able to have the information in one place and be able to send it out to different fans and artists and just easily gain access to those verified fan programs, because that's a key part in this industry is for artists, venues, for everybody involved is the information of who's attending these events and how to access them directly. And so we think this would be a great bridge for that.
A quick clarifying question. In order, suppose I'm an artist or like some sports team, want to use your product, then I have to fully adopt your system so that my ticket is all digital tickets through your system. Is this the case?
Yeah, in one form or another. The point is to have the venue or the event creator issue out their tickets as this smart contract, this non-fungible contract. What we want is we don't want people to be locked into using just the platform. We want the ticket tokens to be able to be transacted on other platforms, which is where we see the white label service coming in handy. And we also want them to be able to sell them securely to another peer without having to go through the secondary ticket exchange, because oftentimes tickets are sold just over Facebook, over Craigslist, whatever, because last minute ticket sale, someone's got a ticket, last minute they can't go, right? And currently what's gonna happen is I would say, hey Derek, you wanna buy my ticket, $100? Here, I'll send you the email that's got it, you can pay me whenever. Instead what we want is we want the contract, the smart contract built in to make it so that I can send Derek my ticket and it'll stay in the smart contract until Derek pays me to ensure that all the parties are compensated fairly. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I just want to ask the same question that was just asked. What are the mechanics of negotiating with a venue or an artist on a per seat basis, or how does that work? And can Ticketmaster lock you out at that level?
Right now, are you? Yeah. So the way they price tickets is on a it's per section really. They price out. So a venue like CenturyLink Field has a map of their seats, right? And they have suggested pricing options. And what they do is they collect data on certain types of events, like certain concerts for artists that gross this many listens or whatever. And so they suggest a pricing option, but at the end of the day, the baseline price for any event ticket is set by the artist or the talent that's being showcased at this event. Does that help answer your question?
No, what kind of contract do you have? Do you have a contract with the venue? Does Ticketmaster have a contract with the venue where they can lock you out?
Yeah, so right now, Ticketmaster does have contracts with basically every large venue. The Ticketmaster and Live Nation recently merged together, where they do own the large majority of high-profile artists, venues, and they basically own that sort of market, which is why we're not trying to directly compete with them. We're trying to offer them a better solution to their existing product.
Thank you, guys. Thanks. Okay, so judges are going to go away for about 10 or 15 minutes. Kevin's going to take them off to one of the conference rooms. They've got a tough decision to make here with the 6 companies. In the meantime, everybody sit tight. We're going to hear from one of our portfolio companies that came out we're super excited about. And then we will wrap it up and a special treat at the end for you guys. So hang on.
All right, cool. So as Greg mentioned, there's going to be a portfolio company we just signed actually last week. Really excited. About a few months back, we spoke at a conference called the Harvard Social Impact Expo, and I got a chance to meet both Erkam and Farhan Javed, and they were on a panel and they were talking about censor-resistant media, and they all have a really diverse background and where they come from, where these different governments, these different regimes, these different social media platforms censor the media and the publishing that goes out. And so they came up with an extremely innovative solution. This is one of the strongest, most intelligent, down-to-earth teams I've ever met. They just presented their demo of Enlighten at Distributed 2018, and we thought it would be a great time to showcase that demo here at Deal Day in Seattle. So without further ado, let's give a round of applause for the Encrypt team.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Hi guys, my name is Irkam Javid. I'm currently a sophomore at Harvard studying computer science. And like Shahan mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders at Encrypt and also the project lead.
Hey guys, my name is Farhan. I study economics and government at Harvard, and I'm the lead for corporate development for Encrypt. And Encrypt is really centered around a simple but very powerful principle, which is that access to authentic and resilient information is the bedrock for any free society. So consequently, the problem that we want to address is the fact that governments and regimes around the world today can use the centralized architecture of the internet to very easily manipulate the flow of information. And this is a huge problem today because, in fact, according to a report by Freedom House, over 2/3 of the world's population actually lives in regimes of governmental censorship. So this is a huge issue that we're trying to address. And the way we hope to address that is with a distributed content hosting model, which is a global network of storage and distribution nodes shrouded in a layer of anonymization between publishers and the storage network. And then all of the metadata of the transactions is stored on top of the blockchain ledger to allow for immutability and to actually create an incentivization layer where various actors are incentivized to behave optimally. So as you can kind of see here from this graphical representation, within a traditional environment, when you have information that sits in silos or proxy servers, it's very easy for any sort of malicious actor, whether it be a regime or a terrorist group, to either coerce the host of the server or to just shut them down and really take advantage of that single central point of failure. But within a distributed environment, because of the redundancies in storage as well as the distribution channels, it's very difficult for malicious actors to entirely take down the network and curtail the flow of information. So this sort of serves as a point of inspiration for us. So our value proposition is a reliable, fast, distributed content hosting platform, which provides front-end security through anonymized channels, back-end security through distributed storage by eliminating any single central point of failure. And we're pretty much creating a marketplace for storage. The network is made up of nodes. Anyone with a laptop or a device with excess storage can rent that storage out and become a participating node on the network and become compensated for that. And on top of that, there are the various socio-political ramifications of what we're trying to achieve here by having a better informed populace that can demand more transparency and accountability from the governments and the regimes that they live in. So just to talk a little bit about the system architecture at a very, very high level, what happens is that media outlets send their content over to the Encrypt protocol. The content is fragmented, it's encrypted, and it's replicated. And then these replicated fragments are distributed across this nodal network. All of the transactions, their metadata, it's timestamped in a blockchain so the protocol knows which nodes to compensate and for how much. And on the user end, whenever that content needs to be retrieved, the nodes will function as distributed CDNs to repackage the content and bring it over to the front end for the end viewer. So in terms of governance, this is a huge issue, right? Because as soon as you have resilience, you need to ensure that the information that you're broadcasting is actually ethical, right? Because we don't want to become the next hub for child pornography. So the way at the protocol level, it would be node operators who kind of determine block attributes, but then at the application level, what we're envisioning is a governance council of various freedom of information NGOs, such as the Harvard Neiman Journalism Lab, Reporters Sans Frontiers, the Committee to Protect Journalists, and all these various organizations who get to decide what is ethical content and what isn't, as opposed to Encrypt deciding what's ethical, as opposed to some nation state or some other body deciding what's ethical. So we want to return both the channels of distribution to media as well as the ethical conversations. In terms of monetization, we're not in the business of dictating publishers what sort of monetization scheme to use. At a very high level, the way I kind of think about this is that what Encrypt technology is doing is that it's lowering the entry costs for firms all around the world to join the media industry. Outlets no longer have to invest in linkages with governments or bureaucracies just to push out the content and pay protection, in a sense, right? Which is going to lead to this proliferation of niche content that hasn't seen the light of day before, which makes Encrypt sort of the perfect marketplace for content syndication. And we're actually partnering with the Poet Protocol to provide cryptographic content attribution and create a revenue sharing model for syndication. Beyond just that, like I said, we're not in the business of dictating to publishers how exactly to monetize their content, which is why we're going to create an array of tokenized subscription models as well as APIs with content management services like WordPress or Drupal or Joomla, so that there's an array of mechanisms that publishers can utilize and see what works best for them. So we have a very diverse team. We come from various different backgrounds, including investment banking, computer science, data science, marketing, and telecommunications. But one of the things that kind of ties us all together is the fact that either we've all been born or have lived considerable amounts of time in regions where censorship is the norm. And that's what really ties us together. We're very mission-centric about this. We have a great team of developers who work with distributed projects, great team of advisors, including a lawyer on the Blockchain Legal Council, a Yale graduate who actually has worked in volunteer distributed computing, and a serial entrepreneur from Wharton. And we have a great team of partners who we're really kind of creating synergies within the decentralized environment. And now, to kind of give you guys a special treat, Encrypt is presenting its very first product, Enlighten. And Erkam can talk a little bit about that.
Thanks, Farhan. So basically with Enlighten, Encrypt is creating this kind of our ideal vision of what distributed content hosting should look like. Essentially, Enlighten is like an anonymized publishing platform with every aspect of it being distributed. This eliminates any possible friction points, essentially. And the application will be deployed amongst a test network of journalists in the coming months as well. So when you look at the Enlighten system architecture, it takes advantage of I2P's existing network of 65,000 nodes. And it uses garlic routing to basically ensure the highest level of security and privacy possible. And it uses I2P boat to kind of eliminate any kind of timing attacks that could happen. So overall, the goal is basically providing the maximized security and privacy for the producer and the consumer of content. And so now we're going to go over and I'm going to show you our application. It's available on, what's awesome about the application is we have it on phone apps and we have it on desktop app as well. Hold up real quick. Let's hope that connects. It's just a little shy. There we go. All right, so the idea behind having it on an app, on a phone app and the desktop is to provide the maximum flexibility. Because sometimes journalists in the field, they want to be able to report as quickly as possible. They don't have time to take out their computer, their laptop and report. They can just take out their phone, quickly jot some things down and then pick up from their computer later on. So we'll go ahead and open the Encrypt application. So for the phone app, we'll be calling the author Alice. And so Alice logs in. And then we'll quickly write a title. We'll make the title about, we'll call the title Reflective Deal Day. My bad, guys. It's hard typing with one hand. Reflective Deal Day. All right. For the description, we'll put Deal Day is, hold up. Deal Day is lit. You can't forget the emojis though, so we'll throw some of them in there too. Fire and 100. Okay. So as soon as I hit publish, what's going to happen is this article is going to be basically propagated through I2P's existing network of nodes, and it's going to be reaching our desktop applications as well. I mean, I'll go ahead and show you that real quick. So this entire process, because of the security and privacy, the high level of security and privacy we're offering, it takes about 10 to 15 minutes. So our developers are kind of working right now to minimize that latency while maintaining this high level of security. But I'll go ahead and show the desktop side. My bad about this. Hey, there we go. Why is it so small? Oh well. Is this in present? Hold up, I'll just unplug it and replug it back in. There we go. It should be fine now. My bad about that, guy. It should be up now. God damn it. I don't know why it does that. Is it because of the TV? I don't use MacBooks, so I don't know how it is. Yeah, I'll just walk through it real quick. So basically, I wish I could maximize this. All right, so the author we have on the desktop version, we'll call his name Bob. So whenever she hits publish, we have Bob, he's subscribed to Alice. So anytime Alice hits publish on Bob's feed, he'll get all of Alice's articles. And I actually I know you can't read it, but these are all the articles we've been publishing earlier today and in the past. It's going to stay the same size, I think. Oh, no, yeah, see, I don't know what does that. My bad about that. So yeah, you can just click on the articles and you can start reading them and stuff. And I wish I could show it to you guys, but it says subscribed over here. And then you go back. So yeah, the features we have is Bob, just like Alice, can publish. He can search. And one of the features we really like on the desktop application is you can toggle the settings. And the idea over here is you can change the level of security that you want. The idea is that sometimes journalists have information that's so sensitive, they don't care how long it takes to get out there. And so our goal is to accommodate for that. And so that's why we have this toggle right here, where you could basically show maximum amount of sensitivity over here. And so at the end of the day, the app from the desktop point of view and the phone point of view, it's a combination of both secure drops, security, and privacy with the distribution medium all in one. And so Farhan over here talk about.
So just to kind of sum up what we've shown today is that Enlighten is the first complete process that combines both anonymization with distributed storage. And that ensures both comprehensive front to back end censorship resistant, which means that we're providing maximized security to both the creators of content as well as the consumers of content. What we're nearing now is the completion of distributed searchability, which will allow us to overcome the friction points that are needed for the full suite functionality for various enterprise uses. And in the coming weeks, like Encrypt talked about, we will be deploying Enlighten with a test demographic of citizen journalists in various regions around the world, including Pakistan, Iraq, Syria, and Turkey, just so that we can prove that we can get eyeballs on content that otherwise wouldn't be possible. Thank you so much, guys, for sitting here with us today, bearing patiently. Check out our website, follow us on Twitter, join our Telegram community, and stay up to date with our progress as we try to make a freer tomorrow. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. It's pretty easy to see why those of us reflective when we were back in Boston like a month or month and a half ago and sat down with these guys that it was like bingo. They got it. They are so impressive, and to still be in school and doing it's remarkable. So we're going to give the judges just another minute or two. I'm going to go in there and ask them to see how close we are. Any questions for the Encrypt team while we're waiting for them? Okay. Grab one of those mics, guys.
Hi, so I was wondering, you're mentioning having it anonymous once it's on the blockchain, but I've heard of certain countries that have various censorship policies actually going and forcibly installing software on people's phones to monitor them from the device side. So is there any sort of encryption with the app itself so that if such software is installed onto phones directly, that that software cannot detect your application being installed and then say, hey, this guy's a journalist who's using this platform, we don't like, arrest him, and suddenly no one hears from him again?
Hello? All right. No, that's actually really good question. So the main value proposition with Encrypt is that once content has sort of been captured, we want to allow it to be propagated in a safe and transparent, well, not transparent, but a safe and resilient fashion. What governments do physically, it's something that to an extent is outside of our control, right? Very much so. But this understanding of sort of encrypting the app, that's not something that we fully explored yet. And I think you bring on a great point. That's something that we can definitely look into. But that being said, I do find it difficult for a government to ensure that whatever type of surveillance software that they want to install, they'd be able to do it on every single device, especially, and that's why we want it to be on more devices than one. Right now it's on phones and laptops. We want to get it to tablets, maybe eventually smartwatches. So we also want to kind of create a native hardware play as well. So these are factors that we're currently considering, but I think you bring on a very, very valid and legitimate point. And that's something that we definitely want to take into consideration. So thank you for that.
Also, one thing I really wanted to stress is the novel thing over here is the coevolution of anonymization and distributed storage over here. The high level of anonymization, we're using several different channels for this. There's Tor that's being used, I2P, and later on mesh networks as well. That makes it very difficult to ascertain who's publishing and where they're publishing from. And then later on in the future, to add a higher degree of, of anonymization and kind of passing through government filters, is we're looking into different ways to embed news articles. Maybe embedding it into a GIF so nobody thinks that there's anything in there, or embedding it within other articles that are native to that region so they don't know that it's reporting their kinds of information, essentially.
Any other questions for the Encrypt team? All right. Oh, right here. Sure.
So curation and censorship are the opposite sides of the same coin. What are your thoughts on curation and censorship?
Very good question. When we talk about censorship resistance, we mean resistance against the type of censorship that we normally see, which is by governments or terrorist organizations. That doesn't mean that there aren't ethical conversations to be had, and that's why the governance model that we wish to construct is something that's journalist-led, because that's the definition of professionalism, right? Normal people like you and me, I mean, I dropped pre-med after first semester, so I'm not going to go around telling doctors, what kind of medical procedure to use, right? It's those of a certain skill set that critique each other and decide what's ethical, what's appropriate, and what should be implemented. And we want to give journalists that power, particularly in the form of freedom of information advocates, having that administrative privilege to decide what content ought to be scrubbed and what shouldn't be. And I don't want to delve into the machinations right now, just in the interest of time. Look out for our white paper that will be coming out next month, hopefully, and we'll definitely get into some of the cryptographic incentives that we're using there. But yeah, we want to return the ethical conversation to media, to journalism, not make it so that it's never scrubbable, but just make sure that it's not governments, it's not Encrypt, it's not terrorist organizations that decide what's ethical and what's not.
I think there was a question over here. Was there another one? Any other questions from anybody? All right, guys, thank you very much. If we could get all the presenting companies to come on up to the stage, I will grab the judges. While we're waiting for the judges, this has got to be a tough decision, guys. This is good. Might as well start your Friday happy hour early if you want to. We are going to have some wine and beer out here pretty soon, so there's nothing wrong with finishing off a day with that. That's going to be coming up. So we encourage you to stick around afterwards, meet the companies, talk to the Reflect team. There's a lot of ArtChain members around here as well, so please do that. Okay. All right. I'm going to have the judges sit here in these seats. If you guys stand over there, that would be great. They're going to be here any minute, I know it.
Any minute.
Yeah, so the company selected, will they get investment now?
They're going to get $50,000 a rock. Is the winner.
Is $50,000 US in rock or
In rock. In rock. USD value in rock. 50,000. All right. Looks like the judges are coming out. We can have everybody take seats. That would be great. Well, judges, I'm changing up your seat a little bit. If you guys could grab a seat up here. Yeah, now you get to see what it feels like to be those guys. Waiting on one more judge. All right, here we go. Kevin, go ahead and take it.
First and foremost, we want to thank everyone who took the time to prepare, to fly here, to come out of town, to take a stand in front of this audience here and folks that are online. We could all feel the passion for what it is that you're trying to solve and the solution that you come up with. So first and foremost, we wanted to say that we appreciated that. So we just wanted to start with the teams and just sort of walk through some of the feedback that panelists had. And so one by one, we'll just go through them, and then we'll have Greg make the announcement what the team consensus won on the winner. So
when Kevin's talking, could you guys come forward, the companies that he's talking about?
Sure. So could Concrete come forward? So some of the feedback was the presentation was well thought out. I think that some of the concerns around who the target market was as it relates to millennials who are accredited investors who also purchase real estate when the trend is sort of the opposite with millennials not really wanting to own anything. There were some questions there. There was also questions as some of the team members were team members of other teams. And so there's the dedication issue as well. And then some questions around blockchain use cases. And so I think that some of that has to be fleshed out a bit. But the idea itself, fractional ownership of real estate, I think is huge. And so we understand the opportunity. So we're looking to have you all perhaps come back and pitch something that's with those thoughts fleshed out. And so that was feedback from the team. So thank you. So Longmen, Suntech. So Sujit, I think that the opportunity that you have before you, you've developed a really strong pipeline of companies, and you have the, I think, a demand use case from customers who want to provide energy, nonstop in places where infrastructure is nascent or non-existent. And so huge demand opportunity. Some of the questions that the team had were around the IoT security. And so I think that, we'd like to see a bit more just in terms of understanding exactly how that works. When you put IT information on chain, how do you solve for that Oracle problem? It's really tough to solve. And so I think that, there's some room to work there, but I think it's a great opportunity. All right. Thank you. The UMatch team. Thank you. So this is in particular, if you can tell by the way I was asking questions, one of the verticals that I have a keen interest in. And Ivan, we spoke about that before. So some of the questions that I think were unclear were a bit about the business model and go-to-market strategy. And so that wasn't really articulated that strongly. And so subscriptions, sure, licensing fees, yeah, that makes sense. But I want to hear more about the demand from the actual, those who are going to be purchasing data. I also wanted to understand the economic incentives. You had quite a few sort of like actors up there that you didn't really articulate how they would be economically incentive using a blockchain, using crypto economics in order to participate in the giving of data in that two-way market. So I think that, there's room to articulate that a bit more, and that's something that we'd be looking for. So thank you. We appreciate the pitch. Thank you.
Before you go, I just one of the things that I'm always doing whenever I'm doing anything like designing an application or a service, is I sit down and I imagine that moment, that click to pay event. What does that look like? What does that feel like for all of the different parties involved, right? And if you had conveyed that to me, I would have felt much more compelled.
Paramation. Oh. So first and foremost, everyone appreciated your passion for decentralization, right? And everything that you've developed, that passion is clear in each one of those modules that you've developed, and they have a purpose and I see your vision. What was a bit unclear was, your approach. It wasn't exactly clear, how all those modules fit in, and I know that you talked about some of that as well during pitch, but some felt that you perhaps were trying to boil the ocean, and so the approach to, sort of taking that technology and biting off more than you chew could be viewed as a risk. But I think from a tech perspective, there's something there for sure, right? You're onto something very cool, and I think that I'd like to see and continue a discussion where you're articulating that in a way that I think the world can appreciate. Thank you. SmartX team. So everyone appreciated I think the youth of the team, to be honest with you, and the enthusiasm. Nothing like getting burned and having a bad experience to sort of motivate you to, sort of writing that. Some of what you're talking about and how you're thinking about it was pretty clear. What the product looks like. I think just in terms of the customer, what we felt was the biggest part that you really didn't include is the artist. And the artists absolutely care about what's happening in those secondary markets. They are the main attraction. If not for them, there would be no event. And so I take some time to really think about what the artist is thinking and what that process looks like for them and how to include them in that revenue stack. And I think, essentially, you guys are on the right path, 100%. So I think it's just a refinement of that, that idea and that messaging. Thank you. Rumble Monkey. So the feedback was pretty good. There is a great incentive for folks to be participating in this network. It solves problems. The team was impressed by the technical and legal acumen. And yeah, it's not legal advice, we get it. But also the clarity of the product, understanding exactly what the product offering is. Some of the concerns were, though, the watcher, if you will, who is just sort of there to judge that games are being played fairly. The concern there is around scalability. And so perhaps articulation of that point would help as well. But overall, great job, guys. Thank you. So we can bring everybody on up and we'll make our announcement. And we'll leave that to Greg Meredith.
So first of all, again, thanks to everyone here for your passion and for taking the time to present your ideas and your work. The group consensus, the group intelligence selected Rumble Monkey out of the groups. But I have to add that a very, very close second was the Smart Ticks. Sorry, your name changed in the middle, so so we would love to have you come back for some additional conversation. So thank you very much.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much, everybody that came here. Thank you to the audience that's watching. This is fantastic for a first event. One thing that I would love is as much feedback as you possibly could give us on how we can make this event better, what we can do different, what you liked about it. Find any of us from the Reflective or Archain team. Go online with that little card that's on your chair. Tell us how we can do better than we did. But thank you so much. And by the way, stick around. There are some beverages on that table. You want to meet, mingle with everybody that's here. Feel free to do so. Thank you, everybody.
Hey, Greg, before everyone goes,
hang on.
I just want to say there was an invisible startup idea that I thought was really at the top, which is Deal Day. One of the things I really, really like about Deal Day that didn't even occur to me until I was sitting in the middle of it was what an amazing education event it is. Right? All the people in this room get to be educated about new ideas, fresh ideas, but in particular about the ideas that are invigorating the Archain community. It's like, wow, this is awesome. we need to do more of this all around the world.
We do, and we're going to. Thank you.
Just very quickly, thank you all. Appreciate it. Thanks.